everybody, welcome back to Chinspinchats episode 7. Today I'm joined by Simpa. Simpa, how you doing, mate?
Pretty good, brother, pretty good. Thanks for the invite, man.
No, I really appreciate you coming on, mate. Obviously a lot of people I know you know what I mean? I want to kind of introduce you to people who might not know you and tell them a little bit about your story, yourself and things you've been up to and some experiences, if you can, please, mate.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, I think we will share quite a crossover of audience. Northeast is quite a small, close-knit community in a lot of ways. And there is a lot of crossover, I would say, between sort of cannabis culture and MMA, sort of culture and fight training and things like that. Mm-hmm. For those that don't know me, I founded Durham City Cannabis Club, I think 2017. And it was basically on the premise or the idea that we should be able to have social spaces, we should be able to gather, consume cannabis, we should be able to trade, we should be able to take part in an active conversation around legalization, around decriminalization, and around people having access, not just to cannabis, but being able to be free to cultivate it, to consume and trade it as they so wish. That then kind of evolved over the years. Once we did a few sort of big pop-up events in Durham, we took over a disused bit of grounds in the center of the city, which we affectionately named Hemp Gardens. And it was a disused bowling green that for about 20 years had just stood empty. That was either used for people drinking during hot days or for people walking dogs during shitter days. So we decided to utilize it as a safe space. It was within a stone's throw and within the shadow of the police station and the local prison. We did, I think, 5-6 of these events over a year and a half. And we had minor police presence. I think on one of the events, some PCSOs turned up. And I basically begged the camera. They were on body cameras, radio was on. And I went, look, please, can we have a meeting? Let's discuss this. They turned up and basically said, we don't have a right to assemble. We didn't have a right to do any of this. We hadn't followed rules or protocols. I calmly explained to her the nature of the protest, the reason we were there, that we were protesting against unjust laws. And they basically didn't know how to deal with this. So they left us alone. We had the rest of the day enjoying it. There was maybe 10, 12 stalls, people from all over the UK. We had sort of vendors selling their various wares. We had education stalls. Our Durham City Cannabis Club stall, as always, was staffed by sort of locals that were knowledgeable and experienced and were willing to sort of share their stories and really just invite people to have an opportunity to see what a few of us already know is the potential, that Amsterdam, Spain sort of style-esque thing where people can be free to access weed, that this culture is allowed to thrive rather than being persecuted and criminalized. Mm-hmm. And then from that, we were lucky enough to take over, shout out to Bowburn Hall Hotel up in Bowburn in Durham. And they gave us the hotel for 24 hours after our first event there at a 420. So actually tomorrow's 420. It was, I think, 2 years ago we took over there. We had about 600-700 people on their 5 acres of grounds. Beautiful day. We had a seminar area inside where we had guest speakers sort of from around the UK. And then the following autumn, we took over again for 24 hours, took over all the bedrooms, the newly built log cabins. We had stalls outside. It kind of got rained off, but inside we had a seminar area with guests from around the world. Yeah. So we had doctors, we had professors, we had former police officers, we had the heads of LEAP UK, which is a law enforcement action partnership, who are quite a progressive voice in the UK drug reform. Yeah. And it's built of former judges, former politicians, cops, people that basically, like, for all their career have gone, drugs are bad, and then now kind of going, shit, maybe we did more bad than the drugs did. Yeah. And so from the Durham City Cannabis Club sort of project, we were evolving, taking over a local cafe, being able to provide that indoor, consistent weekly space. Yeah. And then COVID, and that kind of hampered everything. It put an end to the UK scene for a lot of different reasons. And then it's made it incredibly difficult for us to organize. Obviously, with them trying to criminalize protests, meant that we couldn't use the same discretion to organize together to create that safe space for each other. Yeah. So it's been a bit difficult to get that kind of up and running again. Mm-hmm. So last summer, I decided to start my new project, which is The Simple Life, which is a podcast website, which is a space to then house sort of my own weekly blogs, in-depth kind of pseudo-journalism, I suppose, into the cannabis history, the culture and the scene and what's going on sort of in the UK. And since then, that's kind of flourished into the podcast, like I say, which we're doing all right. I think we're on episode 27 we record tonight.
Nice. Huh?
We've got some quite big name guests coming up. We've got Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong fame recording next week. which is going to be interesting. I've not yet had a fanboy moment in cannabis yet, but I very much think that when he appears on the other side of that Zoom call, he's like, shit.
I think that's everybody's moment who smokes like he's a legend, isn't he?
He truly is, right? Because I mean, I was kind of introduced to weed as a young'un, and then it was his character on the 70s show. It was the most cliched stereotype ever, but it was the only sort of depiction I saw of a cannabis consumer on mainstream television at the time. So you kind of gravitate towards it, you know?
Yeah, aye, it's awesome. Like, it's basically, how did it come about that you were in the position to do that? Like, what led you on to being on the path to kind of defend marijuana, essentially? You know what I mean? What was it?
I'll say cannabis. Marijuana is an evil word to me. It just carries a lot of heavy connotations. So as a term. But even, I suppose, in that, me doing that to you there is, I kind of feel obligated to defend cannabis, I guess, because it's given me so goddamn much over the years. It's given me exposure to other cultures, to other sort of ethnicities, other groups of individuals that otherwise I wouldn't get to experience. Yeah. It really broadened my horizons. It sanded off some of the misconceptions that I had from growing up in quite a small world, as it were. Mm-hmm. And it's really broadened my horizons. And then it gave me a culture and a community when I had nothing else, when everyone else was chastising me and demonizing me, going druggy, bad person, you know what I mean? People were welcoming. They'd go, you smoke weed. So what? Let's get to know you. And then they'll judge whether you're a good or a bad person.
Yeah, for sure.
And then it was Product Earth, which is the UK's largest sort of cannabis sort of festival. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was that in 2017. One of my mates turned up at my door and went, dude, there's a cannabis festival in the UK. I'm like, what are you on about? It's illegal here. This just doesn't happen, sort of thing. I'd been espousing sort of defending cannabis most of my life anyway. Yeah. But then he turned up, he's like, no, I showed us the website. I was like, oh shit, I don't know what this is about, but let's figure it out. So nervously packed like 1.5 ounces into a bag with all my clothes and everything else. Like, this kid was going over a good weekend. Got to security, was like, oh my God, security guys literally opened the bag of the guy in front of us. He must have had like a good half a key in individual things. And he lifted the weed, looked in his bag and went, you all right? And let him in. And I was just like, I'm home. This is home. Instantly there, I was just like, when I first went. It is. It's the weirdest thing because you get like the, oh my God. And like, not here. This is not how we do this here.
It's unreal. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, like, that's what first time when I went to Amsterdam for me. I mean, obviously I've been to Barcelona and smoked there in the cafes and stuff, you know, and a lot of people don't even know that they have cafes in Barcelona, you know, it's crazy. Like, in Copenhagen, we went to Christiania, stayed there a bit and all the same crap, you know, this doesn't matter, like just same lifestyle, just carefree, easy going, you know what I mean? Just sick environment to be in. And so what was it that kind of like introduced you to cannabis? Like, what was, do you know what I mean? Like, what kind of?
I suppose I was introduced as a youth, as a very, very young lad. It was tack and lungs.
Yeah, same as mine.
You know what I mean? It was very painful, very horribly plastic smelling. But the disassociation or the difference of the experience, especially. I mean, I had a really rough, abusive childhood, and then the comfort. The warm blanket of just, everything isn't as shit as it appears to be. Do you know what I mean? And that, as soon as I kind of had that experience, I recognized immediately the value of it. Yeah. And then I suppose over the years, I've had a difficult relationship with it, I suppose, but it's the same with anything else in life. You know, I mean, alcohol is freely available. Yeah, a good percentage of people will have a propensity to develop an alcohol dependency problem, but we don't then go and get rid of alcohol. So we can't use that as the same excuse. Yeah. So, but on the same side of it, there's people on my side of the fence that over evangelicalize about cannabis. And like, no, nothing ever happens. It's the best thing ever. There are no consequences. But anything misused is dangerous. You use a hammer to knock a nail and you can secure a piece of wood. Use it to break somebody's leg. You know what I mean? It's about the application of the tool. You know?
It's a good way to look at it like that if you think of it that way. It was the same for me. I mean, obviously now, nothing about what we did as kids, you know, and you're introduced to, as you say, the lungs, you fucking can't, your buckets, waterfalls, all that kind of shit, you know. And that was the same thing for me, you know. Once I did it, and I mean, didn't get us wrong, I've had many times when I've did it and I've been absolutely ruined off it as a kid, you know, like made a mess of myself. But at the same time, it's like, as you said, just had good and bad moments for it, you know. But it's always been like, it's always been a part of my life, even if I've had periods where I've stopped doing it, you know what I mean? It's always I'll always be a smoker. You know what I mean? It's just the, I don't know. I can't even explain what it is that makes us love it as much as I do. You know, what do you like about it most? You know?
I think we probably share a commonality in that there's probably part of it that's nostalgia. The stopping and the rolling of a joint, the gathering of the components, the clearing of all of the tasks. You take 5 minutes or whatever to just this plus this plus this, and then. And that is so much more rewarding than just say opening a pouring a bottle or something. You craft that, and each one tastes different or feels different depending on how much love you give it, sort of thing, you know. And I think that having that nostalgia, I mean, I still get it when, say, I don't have a pack of skins with this, or don't have a grinder, and I'm making a Lenja grinder, Lenja skins, and it reminds me of literally being like fit 14, 15, hiding around the back of a co-op, somebody going to get like 10 box of Richmond, somebody goes and gets skins from another shop, he goes and gets a Swifty, like 750, 118th, and then come back, and then you crumble it in a one joint, and it's like, and it was the camaraderie, and it was the team building of it, and I think that has never left me, and I think then, like I say, everywhere I go, you then spark up a joint, especially over the past several years where it's got so much more acceptable. Everyone's your friend. Everyone's just, even if they don't want anything from you, they just kind of go, you like me. And then for a minute, they can have that conversation of not having to hide such a strong part of their personality. Do you know what I mean?
No, totally. I couldn't agree more with you. That's it. I wouldn't say a lifestyle, but it's just the way when you smoke, you're just more open into the concept of just talking to strangers and being open like that. You know, a lot of people are kind of really withdrawn and don't really think about it. When you're smoking, you know, all that's out the window, and you just want to be cool. And that's what I love about it, you know. So I mean, some of the funniest times in my life, some of the funniest times in my childhood has always been when I've been stoned, you know what I mean? It's just a special thing to have, and it's a good little I don't know, I wouldn't say a hobby, but it's just a good, I mean, you can be by yourself in the house with nothing to do, sit there bored all night, you smoke a joint, you're on a journey all night, doesn't matter what you're doing, it's fucking amazing, you know what I mean? So, and I feel like the world would be a much better, much calmer place, obviously, if it was so much more accepted everywhere, you know what I mean?
It's in the same way, so you look at alcohol, for example, you could then have a terrible day, go home, I'm going to smash a bottle of vodka and just destroy yourself, get completely out of your mind. Yeah, it'll numb your liver and it'll numb your pain, so you physically won't feel the pain of it. You'll probably get blackout drunk, so you then won't remember whatever it was that annoyed you or whatever. But then you could also go and have a single vodka and mixed with something and enjoy it in a certain setting. So it's again, as we were saying before, about how you sort of use it. And the same is true of cannabis. And I think that because it's so much more multifaceted than alcohol, you can use it in a social space. And obviously there's variance between the different cultivars and terpenes. You and I could sit and smoke the same strain, and you could have quite a very sedatory and quite sleepy and potentially even a sort of paranoid response to it, whereas I could end up with a quite uppity and giggly one because of the difference of our endocannabinoid systems. So I think it allows a space where you can have, it's an amplifier really, so you can use it to amplify. And I think that using it independently in a correct way, sort of not in an abusive sense of I'm going to get as fucked up as I can. But as a tool, just for self-exploration is powerful, because we know that cannabis causes neurogenesis, which is the process of new neurons being developed, the physical blocks you need to think, the pathways of which you think. It also causes neuroplasticity, which is, it helps the ease of the way your brain changes, so you can think differently and more creatively. So being able to access that experience, I think, is vital for people, especially at certain points of your life. Like I said before about my cultural ignorances, at certain points I would say that I was homophobic because of the way I was kind of brought up in the generation I was brought up with. You know, if anything that wasn't masculine was gay, and gay equaled bad. And that was just the culture I grew up in. So I kind of internalized that for a long time. The same with, I didn't grow up with a lot of people of other ethnicities. So they were the other to me. Whereas then through using cannabis, I got to experience other cultures where I met people and went, you were literally just, everything you said for the last 10 minutes is everything I thought. I don't see a difference between, you know what I mean? And once you kind of can experience that, it plants that seed in your mind. And then I incorporate cannabis often with meditation and sort of that sitting and introspection. Those thoughts go together, those memories collide, and all of a sudden you start to realize and question a lot of the cultural indoctrination that we're a victim to.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting the way you just explained that there. It's like, I was talking about earlier, like little things like cafes in Barcelona and stuff like that. I mean, they're all everywhere where it's legal, or not even legal, where it's kind of like tolerated, you know what I mean? It's a different kind of different kind of vibe everywhere around it. I mean, like Copenhagen, there's even Christiania, they've got their own laws there, you know, and people, it's crazy. That's like illegal outside of there. When we went there, we went and skated there. I think it was, I can't remember if we did a week or 2 weeks. We camped there and we skated there, and obviously went to Christiania, and it's unbelievable. It's like there was a weed festival while we were there, and it was just fucking, and like it's not even legal there, but that was in the middle of like the town, like the square, and it was just fucking booming, loads of people, and everyone was the same, you know, just exactly like you just explained, just like fucking free thinking, just chill people, you know. And me, I was mad, man, the first time I went to Christiania, man. You walk in, it's like, have you been? Have you visited?
No, I think
it's like hidden out the way. It's weird. It's like it's in the middle of the city. But then you walk down, it's like a little alleyway next to these flats, and then you're walking down and it's just a long alleyway and loads of random people sitting on the side here, you know. And then you get down and there's just like a proper bright light in your face, and it's all you can really see. It's huge light. You get past it, and then everything's behind it. It's like all these little stalls with like ghillie suits over the top, where there's just people selling weed. And when I walked past, and you know, obviously, weed is for everyone. Like everyone, you know, gear, whatever it is, anybody can enjoy weed, and it's that lifestyle of everyone's accepting of each other. I walked into that, and the first thing I seen, it took us by surprise, was like this really little old woman. She must have been well in her 70s, and she just had the fucking biggest blunt ever. Just walking, massive blunt, just blasting it, like absolutely talking it. And I was just like, fucking hell, this place is wild. You know what I mean? It was unreal, and it was like you know, like when you first went away, and you're like, this is where I need to be. You know, you felt that thing. It was like that there. Just everyone's just fucking chilling, just super open-minded place, just unreal. The skate park there doesn't charge you to skate there. You just get in and it's free. There's Christiania pays for it, so it's open all the time as well. And people just sleeping in there and that, and it's just a fucking cool place. You know what I mean? Now, where's weed took you? What kind of places have you been through smoking cannabis? You know,
it's taken me all over the place. To be fair, it's taken us to America, Canada, Morocco, Ireland, Amsterdam, Spain. I've been quite lucky, to be honest, to travel to a lot of different regions. I mean, I self-funded a road trip around like 7 states in America in 2018, because a lot of the people that I knew that were true grassroots activists, the narrative they were portraying versus what the media was saying just didn't add up to me. And as someone that is keen to not only discover the truth, I suppose, for my own sort of selfish reasons, but to then perpetuate that and put that out there for others to be as informed, I thought, fuck it, I need to get out there. So literally fundraised, got some money together, flew out to Colorado, rented a car, drove around a bit, went to some dispensaries, met some people, sort of saw some farms, stayed with some guys who were doing some projects and stuff, and then drove around some other states, hit up California, went to Hemp Fest and spoke at the world's largest cannabis event. And I just wanted to see the nuances between the different states and understand what legalization meant. And I learned a lot while being out there. I learned the nuance of how they were still criminalizing people, how the system and the states were set to profit massively from selling cannabis while still criminalizing people for trading it, owning it, growing it, consuming it. So it really sort of motivated me to come back to the UK and push and do the projects that I do, to try and go beyond this idea of, oh, we've got to decriminalize or we've got to legalize, because neither is technically correct in the sense that you can't legalize something that isn't illegal, because cannabis isn't illegal. It's illegal for us to do stuff with it without permission from the Home Office. If you get a nice little license or a nice little prescription, you've got permission to access it, but the rest of the people sort of don't. And all the regions that I went and the diverse cultures and communities that I saw, they knew their own piece of the picture, as it were, but it was hard to find people that wanted to connect to see that larger image like I did, because it's almost antithetical to the reason they got involved. A lot of people are involved for money. And then when you start talking about a free idea, because I mean, Christiania is a free town. And so it was established. It was one of the last sort of communal projects to survive. And they've gone through all kinds of shit over the decades, but they exist as a freehold community.
There was riots, wasn't there, in the day originally?
There's like grenades thrown into stores and all sorts of stuff.
Crazy, man.
And shootings. But the same is then true of say, Amsterdam. So the coffee shops in Amsterdam, the gangs figured out a massive loophole in Amsterdam that if you shoot at a coffee shop, because the coffee shop's been involved in a shooting, it has to shut for 2 weeks. So the gangs go around then and they threaten the coffee shop owners and go, you buy from our supply, because the backdoor problem in Holland means that it's legal for you to have 500 grams on site and sell it, but it's not legal for you to get that 500 grams to the site or on there or to cultivate it. It just magically appears every day. There's 500 new grams to sell, and the Dutch are like, okay, well, and so the gangs want to control that trade. So they just literally someone drives on a scooter, 2-3 in the morning, there's no one there, single shot fired into it, they close for 2 weeks, they lose that 2 week sales. They then reopen, gang goes back to them, we want control. So there's limitations all over the place. We're seeing this within Spain at the minute, with clubs being taken over during COVID. A lot of the clubs, although they weren't supposed to, were taking on tourists and actively targeting tourists, because during the one weekend of Cannabis, Europe's largest cannabis event, they could make more revenue than they could the rest of the year. So there's only something like 150 licensed clubs, but there's somewhere close to 600 clubs. So they're illegal and they pay off people, and there's a lot of corruption within the Spanish police. But they've got a similar sort of system. The gangs are turning up, they're taking the licensee and going, this is ours now. And they're kind of going, okay. And then they've got this enterprise where they can use the protection of the law to cultivate all this cannabis and then trade it in other markets, where they then take this Barcelona grown weed, send it somewhere in a Eastern European country or whatever, and the market price goes through the roof. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous what they're doing with this, because we're missing the point. We need to allow everybody free access to this. There's already a booming market here in the UK, for example, for 10 billion plus a year. We can easily tax that, regulate that, and legitimize it. There's some horrible people that need removing from it, but the same is true of legal businesses right now.
Any business, any walk of life, isn't it? It's good and bad and everything. It's so in an ideal world, right, Simpa, what would you, in an ideal world, if, say, for instance, outside the box, if certain things could happen, what would be your ideal course? What would you want the system like to be like now in regards with kind of like cannabis, talking about that talk?
I'd want right now, as in signed by law, true decriminalization tomorrow. So any charge connected with cannabis isn't a charge right now. That you will not be arrested for it, you will not be targeted for it. They will not take, with proceeds of crime, take your house, your possessions, your money, anything like that. And then from that point, we have an true honest conversation. I often use the analogy of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which is what occurred post-apartheid in South Africa, which is then people from all walks of life got together from all classes and went, this is what we did for the past several years. That honesty and openness and transparency allowed for a period of time where they could actually start to organize and create a society fairer for all. Granted, it's kind of gone a bit off rails, but the idea was true. I think the same thing needs to happen with cannabis. So the government MPs that are currently sat in Parliament making money off air quotes medical cannabis companies that are invested in all of these other projects that are benefiting from prohibition, they need to be brought to light in the same way that the thousands of dealers in the UK need to be given a safe space to go, well, actually, I've dealt for 35 years. I've got a client base of 300 people. We cultivate in 4 or 5 houses. That person deserves a license. If you've managed to run a business like that, you've got a brand, you've got your own genetics, you've got a customer base. The only thing that criminalizes you is the goddamn state. So we need to get all these people together and have that honest conversation. It's not a case of creating a classist, gentrified, whitewashed, fucking legalized. I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, can I?
Of course you can. I swear.
I'm smoking weed on it. I'm like, can I swear?
It's fucking like me. Smoking it, but still.
It's a hell of a way to end the podcast.
My mate was saying that if you fucking let one off, man, you'll fill wherever you're on. He's like, not just that, the actual shells go super hot, so you'd probably set a fire as well. Ended in style.
Series finale style.
It's just like the maxes there. The maxes, my pal gave us them as well. He's called Honor, and he basically just he metalworks essentially. You know what I mean? Is it blacksmith? Is that what you would call it?
Blacksmith, yeah.
Just amazing fucking dude. Anyway, off the subject a bit. For people who don't know who you are, mate, like where did you grow up, and can I just talk about a little bit about your past life and stuff like that as well? What led you essentially into being the person with the mindset you have now, and take on life essentially?
Yeah, I suppose I'll give you quite a sort of condensed history. My life was kind of, I suppose, tragic from an early age. My dad killed himself when I was, I think, 18 months.
Really? Oh,
yeah. Mother remarried. Literally, don't even remember the guy. It's slightly off topic, but it's an interesting response to that's sort of where we sort of go to. But yes, I appreciate it. But yeah, she remarried an incredibly abusive, horrible, vile person that then tormented and abused me in many multitude of ways for many years. I was removed from mainstream education quite early on in primary sort of years, went to some very horrible institutions. Basically, because of the violence and abuse I was suffering at home as a child, that I couldn't articulate what was going on and wasn't believed by anybody around me, I would become very violent towards sort of teachers. And in a mainstream setting, can't kind of do that. I had a champion, ironically, in my primary school teacher who currently, for the rest of his life, carries a scar on the back of his head off where I smashed a chair on him. But yet he was the only person in a meeting of, I think, a dozen people, of boards of all over the country. Basically, they said that I wasn't welcome in education. There's one institution in the UK that won't take that kid on. And it was prior to the change of the child protection laws in the UK. So that as young children, we were treated as violent adults. So they'd restrain you with 4 or 5 adults. They'd cover you for spit guards and stuff like that. They'd use like thumbhole techniques and stuff on tiny children. So that kind of was, I'm just giving this as a level of a juxtaposition of where I was. Then from that went into a year of secondary education, because again, the same head teacher fought for me to have the last bits of year 6 to stabilize me for sort of higher school. Comprehensive, yeah, you know what I mean. And so I got about a year into there. Unfortunately, my mother was still married with the abuser, and things obviously escalated with violence as I got bigger and was able to defend myself and fight back more, and was then kicked out of mainstream education, again, put into another sort of institution. And again, you stay there for a week or so, go home for a weekend, stay there for a week. And it kind of made me a very bitter, very aggressive, very hateful person. I hated, like I said, anything other. If you didn't look like me, act like me, you were bad. If my music wasn't screaming at me, it was shit music. If the film wasn't violent, it was a shit film. Do you know what I mean? It was that kind of person. And then came out of mainstream education, so I went into work full time in a supermarket. Despised it. I couldn't stand the structure of it, the idea of it. 50 years and then I die. I was hateful, bitter, suicidal, self-destructive. You know what I mean? I was earning good money at the supermarket, but I was just drinking and drugging up the wall with everything and everything I could find. You know what I mean? I still had a relationship with cannabis all throughout this, but it was muddied in the water of the self-abuse and everything else. You know what I mean? I'd a real problem with sort of self-harm and was in and out of hospital and whatever else. And then I started to sort of discover psychedelics and entheogenic substances like LSD. And I'd taken them before, but always in stupid settings, you know, like 5 pints in and then someone goes, oh, do you want one of these? Well, go on then. Whereas then I sort of discovered that actually if I go to the woods and I take one of these things and I camp out and I sit with the fire, something else happens. You know what I mean? If I then get brave enough to face the shadowy figures that appear in those experiences, it was healing. And I was able to then look at my experiences as a child, sort of put them into place, and alongside a lot of other intermediate therapies, was able to kind of recognize that I'm not what I felt society was trying to shape me into being, and was able to do this 180. And then in my sort of mid-20s, I recognized what the hell had happened. And I was just like, holy shit, who am I now and who I was? The power of these things in between. I started doing this research. I started reading all these books, started listening to podcasts, watching movies and documentaries. And I was just like, this passion, it just set a fire in me, because I'd kind of gone through all of this and I felt not suicidal, but empty. I was like, I've done the trauma. I've kind of healed it as much as I can. And now what do I want to do? And like I said, recognizing that power, that give me the purpose and the reason to sort of continue. So it's not just cannabis that I advocate for. I mean, I regularly consume psilocybin-containing mushrooms. I've had hundreds of sort of DMT experiences. I've tried most entheogenic compounds, not in a destructive, druggy kind of way, but in a
recreational way. Right?
In a sort of self-exploratory way, but also in a social settings as well. Because a lot of these substances, especially things like MDMA, powerful tools. I've seen huge muckles, horribly hateful, racist, homophobic guys cuddling and kissing on men and laughing and joking and it transfers through. Do you know what I mean? So then they've lost that ignorance, they've lost that bigotry.
The barriers kind of exactly.
So it's like we often say attribute the rave culture in another community I grew up in that again just showed me so fucking much. Going to places and watching people that are from pit villages that have been fighting for 30 goddamn years. People that are forced, my dad hated your dad who hated your dad who hated your dad. All of a sudden, kicking it back and drinking a bottle of cider and halving some doves. And it was just a different sort of world. And I feel that needs advocating for, that needs fighting. I'm now in a position where I'm articulate enough to be able to write. I'm lucky enough to be able to produce work for a lot of outlets. and I'm now a writer for Weed World magazine, which is published in America, Canada, and a few sort of European countries, including the UK, and just trying to sort of push and get that narrative out there. And I feel that it's an obligation, but it's also a privilege. Do you know what I mean? Because I've been able to stand and speak with cops. I've been able to stand and speak with people that should screw me up. I mean, my own local police force invited me in to do a community coaching course with their officers. So I got to sit in a room with 5 cops, and every time they spoke of ignorance about drugs, I would go, no, that's wrong. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And then educate them, and then actually go, huh. And then at the end of this course, them thank me for it. Was just such a wonderful juxtaposition compared to the angry kid who was like, I'm going to do drugs because I want to get out my fucking head and I just want to whatever, and just so full of ego and bravado and bullshit. And then to be able to espouse the benefits of these things to my oppressors and to feel empowered by it. I want everyone to have that same opportunity, because there's kids growing up now that I went through the same shit I went through, that are finding relief in these substances, that are finding community and culture and connection, that deserve not to be criminalized, because they could have their lives ruined. I've been lucky. Touch wood. Oh God, that was loud. Sorry. I've not gone to prison. I've not, anytime I've been interacted with the police, they've taken mental health into consideration. They've actually listened to an argument, and I've been cautioned and released. Whereas there are people who are still that angry child that I was, that when the police pick them up, fuck you, pig, hitting them and whatever else. And all of a sudden, no matter, even if they do have sympathy for you, you've assaulted an officer. So I feel that no one else is speaking of this as they move to create medical cannabis and now medical mushrooms and medical LSD. Where's the community? They're still going to be criminalized. We're still going to be going to prison. They're still going to be destroying whole housing estates, trying to target drug use instead of just going, no, leave the people to what they're doing. If they're then under the influence of a drug, commit a crime, they've committed a crime. It's got nothing to do with the drug. There shouldn't be that line to it. There is still conscience and consciousness when you're under a substance.
100%. That's I totally couldn't agree more with you. You know, the amount of times I've heard people saying, he did this because of this, and it's like, no, like what we were saying earlier, if he's done that, like that's in him anyway. Like it's like these people get like fucking steaming drunk and then say, oh, this was this because of this and this, and it's like, well, you're going to do them things anyway, you know what I mean? Like if you fucking letting it control you that much, you know, as I didn't think that's the case so much. For the most part, smokers, I mean, obviously good and bad and everything like we're saying, but for the most part, I feel like cannabis is just, I just feel like it takes that edge off, you know, that aggression and all that kind of thing. I think for the most part, it's leveling everyone down, you know what I mean? And do you know what I mean?
We saw this when, so Durham obviously famously, we led the way in the UK with a policy called deprioritization. Very big word. But basically what that encapsulated was the chief constable, at the time, the chief constable and the police crime commissioner, who was a newly elected person, Ron Hogg and Mike Barton, respectively. They basically got together and went, right, we're going to make it so that our officers arrest anybody for low-level possession, and even for a small time, low-level cultivation, so a couple of plants, the officer would be reprimanded. So if that cop brought in the person, you know, big smart face, just slams down a 20 bag, the desk sergeant would bollock that cop. They would throw the kid out as a caution, if even that. And this kind of set a precedent that snowballed for a few years that obviously led to then Teesside Cannabis Club, Durham City Cannabis Club, and several other Durham clubs being able to have these events and do this culture. But what we then noticed with the crime statistics, crime went down. Then when they went to places like Seaham, which were rampant with heroin dependence at the time, they went, right, let's do needle exchanges. Let's start to look at how we can increase benefits for heroin users. Let's see how we can help stabilize their lives. Again, crime dropped off a cliff. They then went, right, let's quietly look at sex work, because with the economically deprived area, because of austerity, people are having to trade sex for money to feed children, sort of thing. We're in that kind of shit of a situation. So then, right, how can we regulate that? How do we regulate brothels? How do we look at creating a space for STI checks, for providing contraception? So there were all these progressive policies that were moving sort of forward, and it really directly affected everybody in the wider community. So even if you're one of these people that's like, oh, them dirty smackheads, you know, these crackheads and all these goddamn druggies, by the state and the system helping the drug consumer, they were benefiting. The parks were cleaner. The needles weren't there because they were taking it to exchanges to get clean needles, which meant there was less hepatitis. There was less HIV. There was less other diseases in the population. So it's a no-brainer. And it was novel that the police were the ones to do this, because the politicians are still screaming till they're blue in the face that they have no intention to reschedule cannabis or to look at ending the war on drugs.
So what do you think, because I can't even remember what happened with it, but why did so cannabis was it was once a class, then it was moved, wasn't it? And now it's moved again. So what's the situation on that? Because I remember when it happened, and I was fucking, as far as I remember, I was young, it's a vague memory of it happening, but I remember that it happening, and then obviously it's changed again. So what's the situation?
It was, I'll answer this in short and then I'll answer it longer, if you know what I mean. So in short, I think it was around 2003, 2004. And the Labour government at the time, Blair and Brown, they moved cannabis from a Schedule B to a Schedule. They moved it from a Class B to a Class C. It remained Schedule 1. But what that meant is that Schedule 1 basically says that it has no accepted medical value, a high propensity for abuse. So that's why it's scheduled that way. Then the class of when you get caught with it, the ABC is for how they punish you. So then a C meant that you'll get a fine. You wouldn't then face incarceration for an offence. So they did this, and basically we saw head shops and everyone else flourish, and people were getting a bit cheeky with things. Obviously, what led to then eventually bans on legal highs over a decade later, that market really started to flourish, and people were like, okay, we can have this. A few wave of coffee shops appeared. People like Colin Davies, Jeff Ditchfield, Gary Hughes, they opened coffee shops around the UK. And then the police busted them, and they were taking them on the big activism scene, and people were really getting a gusto. And then mainstream press and everyone else started to demonize skunk psychosis and all of this stuff. And then a few years later, they moved it back from a C to a B. And then they started targeting it more aggressively, more heavily. And so one of the reasons it looks like this is happening is because of what was thought of as being a conspiracy theory for quite a while, but is quite clearly evidenced. So in 1996, California kickstarted the modern revolution by legalizing so-called medical cannabis. So they went, if you've got one of 12 qualifying conditions, you get this little magic card and you can go buy weed. So in 1997, California had one of the largest per capita increases of back pain and insomnia, two of the qualifying conditions. Of course, because everyone went, but then it got to the point, if you go to the doctor and he'd go, how's your back? How are you sleeping? He'd lead you in every question. As soon as you hit one of them, he'd go out and give you this, give me my $100 and get out. And it got to the point they were setting them up on the beachfront. So you could literally land as a tourist, go into this doctor's office, very chilled, beads as a door sort of style. He'd go, so yes, sure, here you go, buddy. And then you'd go out there to the medical marijuana store next door, and you'd go and you'd get your weed, and then boom, you're on your way. And it created this system. But then at the same time, we created a royal commission in the UK. So our government creates royal commissions when they want to get an independent view on a subject. They want to they want to learn something on a subject. So they went, right, does cannabis have therapeutic properties? Can it benefit people? What should we do with it? This royal commission went away. I think it was Philip Robson. I think it was the guy who did the commission. And they went away, looked into all this research, looked into all this shit, came back, and they went, we reckon should decriminalize it. End all criminal punitive measures for anybody dealing with it. Investigate immediately. Start creating therapeutic products. This thing has got something to it. Seriously, let's look at this. And at this point, we're only 5-6 years since the discovery of the endocannabinoid system, this large system in our body that basically regulates everything from sort of respiration through to reproduction. And they came back. The government of the day kind of went, no, fudged it, hid it. This then. Suddenly that year, this huge pharmaceutical, what would become a huge pharmaceutical company, GW, was established, GW Pharmaceuticals. They then changed the law in 2001, creating a new Misuse of Drugs Act. In this, they basically created a new schedule for cannabis, and it was one sentence that meant that it was legal for an institution to create and prescribe a Schedule 1 drug. Because the problem is you can't prescribe a Schedule 1 drug if it says it has no medical value. That's the definition of it. So they created this law to go, but in this special circumstance, then what they did is create a license to cultivate. And they gave it to GW Pharmaceuticals. Then for 20 years, no other person, no other entity was allowed to grow in the UK, just this one organization, right? So we're now at a point where think about America, think about Israel, Australia, Canada, look at Mexico about legalized. So the size of some of these populations and countries, do you think of where you think of weed's grown, right? The UK produces 75% of all legal weed in the world. It's like 300 odd tons in 2019 in 1 year alone. The exponential growth on that is we're adding like nearly 100 tons a year on it as they keep growing with this. Yeah. And that's through one company. While at the same time, we've then legalized medical cannabis quotes in 2018 in this country, by they've created another schedule for it so they can give a piece of paper. But if you or I smoking this, even if we had a serious medical problem, we knew it was helping us, and even if our doctor accepted that, we're still going to be criminalized. Yeah. Because we haven't bought it from them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the con. Crazy, that's the con. They won't recognize what you do. You could grow the best organic, beautiful plants at home. And they're going, that can't be medicine. That's street weed. That causes skunk psychosis. That's dangerous and addictive. And then they'll turn around and go, give us 150 quid for a consultation. And then here's a prescription. You can buy our weed. And then you look at the profile of it. The Bedrocan products that they're importing from Holland, the flower, is Jack Herer, which is a strain most consumers will be aptly aware of. It was grown and named after one of the most legendary activists of cannabis. So it's then being co-opted by this pharmaceutical enterprise. So you can see what's kind of happened here. Instead of us following the Americans' route and going, give it to the goddamn people, and allowing that market to develop over 20 years, they've hidden it. And in that time, they've got patents for cannabis to treat cancer. 2010, cannabinoids destroying by causing apoptosis, which is the process of cells killing themselves in cancer. So they're now still calling it a conspiracy. They're arresting cancer patients in this country who are growing cannabis to create full extract cannabis oil, or what's so-called Rick Simpson oil, RS oil. So they're producing that. They're then getting arrested and facing prison.
It's crazy.
While at the same time, an entity in this country, which has just been sold for £5 billion to Jazz Pharmaceuticals in Ireland, to have this patent, to be able to then produce this. They're now looking at it for treating psychosis and schizophrenia. Bear in mind, the term skunk psychosis was created by GW Pharmaceutical, because that main crop they're exporting, that strain is skunk number one. It's a joke. It's all, when you really zoom out and can look at the scope of this deception, it's terrifying in a certain way, because you then think of the lives lost. All these campaigns with children with epilepsy and everything else. That's one thing and needs to be taken into consideration. But you think of the thousands of lives we lose every year to conditions like cancer, to things like even complications from stuff like diabetes, when we know the ingestion of cannabinoids can help regulate insulin levels and actually reverse diabetes. We've seen that cannabinoids can reduce asthma. When we start to look at this, it's cannabis cures. It doesn't treat conditions like what they want. They want you'll be ill and go to them like, I've got this problem. And they go, all right, take this drug every day for the rest of your life and you'll be fine. Whereas what cannabis seems to be doing with its cellular regenerative properties, its ability to help heal cells and its multifaceted nature, it allows you to literally heal yourself. So you end the need for these maintenance drugs. And that's what's so scary for them. So in this 20 years, they've created 2 patented products for GW, Sativex and Epidiolex. Sativex was an oral spray.
I've seen it. Yeah, my mum had it. My mum had MS, and she got it. That's what she got for under the tongue there. So what's the situation with that? What is that?
It's like a sublingual spray. So you spray it into the sublingual glands here, and so that's a really thin membrane. And the way that the molecules set in the carrier oil, and there's some ethanol in it, that's an alcohol-based one, which for a lot of users that have to consistently use it actually wears the skin and can really damage the sort of esophagus and under the mouth. But you then absorb it into the bloodstream sort of really quickly, and you get the effects of the cannabinoids. But what they found is that we have a thing of like, what's the term for it? Sort of like cultivar tolerance. Like you smoke or you consume a certain profile of a cannabis plant, your body kind of adapts to it and kind of gets used to it. So you need to be able to vary between them to keep your use, or have a tolerance break, so that then you can consume the same profile and get the initial effects that you got before. And so what they did is to restrict access to that, is they made it so unbelievably expensive that the NHS then couldn't afford to cost it. So then the NHS patient would go and spend £9 on a prescription, but that bottle was costing the NHS £450. So the math there, they couldn't afford to do that. So then obviously that meant a lot of people left on the black market. GW didn't want to lose out on this, so they now have contracts in, I think it's 29 countries to sell Sativex and to sell the products that it's developing.
Crazy,
this other one, Epidiolex, is then to treat epilepsy in children. I mean, what's so fucked up about this is before 2018, they weren't accepting any of this in the UK. They weren't listening to it. Yet it was a British-born scientist, William O'Shaughnessy, in the 1800s, went over to India and he observed them using cannabis for everything, literally everything, from enjoying it as herb, taking it as sacrament to speak to God, healing all sort of ailments. And he recognized that they were using it to treat people with these fits, with epilepsy. So it's like nearly 200 years ago, we've known that. And yet just it took until they'd recognized a way that they could make it profitable that then they let us have it.
It's crazy, isn't it, mate? It's mad. I've seen videos of people who've given their kids weed, you know what I mean? And in whatever form it's been kind of like put into or whatever. And you see the fits completely, you know what I mean, gone, you know, stop. It's crazy, man. It's mad to think that they've got that kind of reach to help people and kind of holding it back for the greed, essentially, isn't it? It's fucking mad.
I think greed is a big part of it. What I often get or lose some of my audience to is the idea that, again, if we zoom out past that, greed is always an initial sort of consequence of the way this system kind of operates. But what's the larger part of it is social control. So what we talked about in Free Christiania, if they then were suddenly to allow everywhere to operate like that, to legitimize the people that already live like that, the consequence and the effect of that in society would be as great as LSD's impact in the Summer of Love in the 60s. And they don't want that. That'll destroy their economy. That'll destroy their investments in the constructs that they've created. Because, I mean, what I often speak of in my podcast is the weird and the wonderful world that is cannabis consumers. They reckon there's somewhere 5 million sort of plus in the UK. Can you imagine what our society will look like when they are free and confident and allowed to be themselves, not have to hide they've got a leaf on their hoodie, not have to not get involved in a situation because they've got a tenner bit in their pocket, not have to worry
every
time
walk in shield if you have a drink, you're going to hide out the weed, some weird fucking bushes like some predator.
Exactly. So all of the way that internalization of the criminal, you being criminalized by the system, it dampens and hampers your development as a human. It stops you exploring your true potential. You then literally start to go, well, I'm a druggie, so I must be doing something wrong. And it grinds you down. Can you imagine when we tear that veil off and we welcome and collide those two societies? I can't fucking wait for it. I really can't. Because when I used to drink and I used to go down the pub and I'd smoke a joint at the bottom of a beer garden, like 5 or 10 people would come, I haven't smoked 10 years. I want those cultures to collide because what we talked about before of the erosion of ignorance, the erosion of bigotry and the fear of other, that's the biggest one, is the fear of other. And I suppose the other large factor is the loss of curiosity. Do you know what I mean? So I meet so many people who have just, I'm not going to say dead inside, it's a horrible way of describing it, but they've lost or they've dampened down to such a point where they're not excited by anything. They don't give a shit. They're just mulling through and going through the wear of it. And I think that cannabis, and especially the entheogenic experience with psychedelic substances, they just both put you back to that childlike state.
For sure.
And even for just a few days and weeks afterwards, you carry this curiosity and this wonder and you look around and like, the grass is greener, you know what I mean? You can feel the sun. You can truly be present for a little while. I think these guys in the pub, they're the ones who need it fucking most. I can access these things too easy. Well, not too easy, but with great ease. You know what I mean? Whereas these guys wouldn't even begin to know. And the fear of it, of going, I'm a druggie if I did this. They need the option and an environment that suits them. I'm not talking about dragging them to a bunch of dreadlocked barefoot hippies and go spend a weekend with them. You can't crash them into that extremity, but you can give them a space to explore that, where they can then look at themselves and have it. Because I've done it before, and it's something I often speak to my friends about, is that one of the most profound things you can get on psychedelics is this kind of just pause. So you live life up to the experience, then you go, oh, where am I? I'm 27 or I'm whatever age you are, sort of thing. And then you go, I've been working this place for 5 years. I said it was going to be 6 months. What am I doing? And you start to really question these things. And in that period of time, you can then make those adjustments. And it's like opening the settings panel of yourself and kind of going, oh, I'm going to turn off that one, turn that on. I really need to turn the brightness back up on this sort of thing. And you can have that reset. That epiphany, kind of revelation of just like, I'm still alive. Just because whatever's happened doesn't mean that's my future. That's the main thing that we lose, is going, oh, I was this yesterday and I was this last year and 5 years ago I did this. We're not the same people who we are 5 days ago. We evolve so fast that society imprints on us this idea that at 18 you should have picked this job and you should have picked this career and you know exactly who you are. I am so far from who I am at 18. If I met him on the street, I'd walk past, I wouldn't even know him. I wouldn't even know my own face. I'm so different in every aspect. And if you are not, with the greatest of respect, you're kind of wasting your life. If you're still locked in that mentality, then you've missed so much potential growth. You've missed so much potential opportunities to widen and broaden that horizon, because we all have them. No matter your economic station or situation, you can still strive to reach outside of your comfort zone, to step outside of that box and experience the other. And every time you do, it gets wider and wider and wider until like I went to America by myself, and I was literally at one point at the height of my depression, anxiety, I was agoraphobic. The sound of my letterbox would give me heart palpitations. I'd be scared of, is it post? Like, is it, am I going to lose benefit? Am I going to get whatever? You know, it was such a shit situation. To then going, no, I'm going to go fly to the other end of the world, rent these cars, drive on the other side of the world, drive 6,000 miles through states where one state I'm legal, the next one, my grinder will put me in prison for 6 months. The next one is just Mormons and cops galore, then getting over to the legal side again. And like all of these challenges, and like I slept in the woods in Colorado, and it wasn't until I went back to the ranger station 3 days later that he told me it's bear season and bear country. do you know what I mean? I went into the woods. The first place I went, it was a Silver City, an old mining village, like coming over the Rockies. And I just pulled into a car park and I'm going to go for a walk in the woods. Complete novice, complete idiot. And I went off track for about 10 minutes and I met with this giant mama moose and baby moose. And these things are like, I swear, in my head, it still feels 15 foot tall. They're not quite that tall, but they are giant things, right? And I've got my camera and I'm just like, click, click. And then I've just got this kind of paralyzing feeling of how small and insignificant I am. I'm like, I spent 10 minutes off track. So I was just all of a sudden like, yeah, exactly. So my brain kind of panicked and I'm like, shit. So I get back to my car. First thing, I'm a pacifist and a vegan, but I drove to Walmart and bought a Bowie knife. Right. Big hunting Bowie knife, because you can open carry in most of the states I was in. I was spending a lot of time in wilderness and camping, A, to reduce costs, but B, because I love being outside. I love going and buying quality weed and edibles out there and going having a lush fire. I flew out with my DMT pen as well. So I had some wonderful experiences
my
out
friend's
there.
got one of them. I'll not take you off course there, because this is what I want to talk about, but we'll get back to the DMT pen, because my friend's got one. I've smoked it twice, and I smoked the Changa the first time, which is like the root. And then obviously the next time was, which I did the like synthetic, whatever it is, like the powder and the thing in. I didn't have enough to get to where I wanted to do with it. But anyway, we'll get back to that. We'll get on that in a minute. But it's so you were camping.
Yeah. So
you got back.
Went back, got this giant ass Bowie knife, and was just like, you know, like I said, I'm in my head. I was like, that moose could have turned and trampled me. It could have just decided, you're going to hurt my kid, I'm going to have you. I didn't know if it was, I didn't even like, my brain didn't know if it's hunting season. Am I in an active shooter place? I'm not wearing high vis. I didn't think of any of these goddamn things at all.
You know, I would have, the first thing I would have thought, if that's here, what else? You know what I mean? The first thing, because obviously you see a moose, obviously it's like huge, you're fucking terrified.
I think, what eats that?
If you can have something like this, and I've walked fucking 10 minutes out the other way, and I'm in here now, what else can be there? It's terrifying.
It is quite crazy, but it was just so surreal as well. Because where I camped, I was up quite a high altitude, so I was quite breathless. So I kept going for walks from my campsite, but I was planting markers and stuff. I got a bit smarter to it, and I started to remember sort of like an SAS book I read as a kid, and like some of the sort of survivalist training I did sort of for practice and fun as a sort of teenager and stuff. And there's a picture on my Instagram. I've just got this like a thigh bone or something, and it is just monstrous. I'm just kind of looking at it. And it was the thought of, then you're like, so what killed this? I'm only like 500 yards from my campsite, sort of thing. And it was just the weirdest sort of experience. And then so I ended up just camping in California a few weeks later, and I stayed in the Sierra National Forest. And you drive down, and basically you can camp kind of anywhere. You've got to be 100 yards off the road, and people have clearance, and you typically part of your clearance. And in California, bushfire, like wildfire season, so you've got to get an app on your phone to even light like your cook burner. You've got to have that, otherwise you can get fined, go to prison and shit. It's like that serious biz. Went at the first site, didn't like look at the second site. It was awesome, lush spot between some trees. My hammer, it was clearing a spot, and I got stung by about 8 or 9 hornets or something. And it just came out this nest, and I was literally doing on my shoe. I kicked my shoe into a tree. Shoe got stuck dangling from a tree. I dove into my car. My brain was like, right, so I'm cool. There's nothing in here with it. Started swelling, and my brain's just like, again, I don't know what's indigenous. So I drove to the next campsite. I was like, dude, are you from here? He's like, I'm not from California, but I'm American. And I went, what do you have here? A hornet. And I told him about it. He's like, oh, buddy, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. So, but I'd literally, again, my brain was like, is this thing going to kill me? And he was like, you'll be cool, dude. You'll be cool. Just put a cold compress on it. And I was like,
I can say you're an intelligent person, right? And me as a kid, right? I was the biggest freak ever. I was bugs, insects, fucking animals, whatever. I had the book, you name it, I'd read it, all these kids the lot, I was interested in stuff like that. I was, any bugs I would find, I was just trying to learn about them. I was fucking loving it. And so I knew quite a bit about animals, and I feel like I've got quite a wide, I wouldn't say I'm super knowledgeable on, but general knowledge, I would probably say I'd have a decent idea of having a bit of crap about it. Anyway, I went to Barcelona, and the first time I went to Barcelona was the first time, obviously, I'd found out that there was cafes there. And I'm a fucking smoker anyway, me. I've smoked blunts for fucking years, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I remember getting absolutely blazed, being smoking all day, eating fucking out, skateboarding all day. We went to this zoo in Barcelona, and I hopped the fence, right? And just because it's funny, it makes it sound like a right screw up, but it was like it's a big zoo anyway, but there was an animal kind of walkway, and we were getting, it was cool, the cages, you'd see some animals, but we were quite a way away from them. I want to fucking see them, you know what I mean? So there's an animal it was metal kind of bridge, but the animal, it was a tunnel, but you could see through the top. Imagine if you had a pipe and you cut the top off it, but put metal mesh over. That's what it was like. So you could see them if they walked through, but it had a big gap right in the middle. And I was looking over like that, and this fucking huge antelope come walking up near it, and I was like, it's getting kind of fucking close to us. This I'm thinking I know it's not like a fucking, I know it's a venomous, or I know it's not, you're not going to get near a tiger, but I know it's not going to be something that's going to fucking physically try and fuck us up. But it's that big, as you said about that moose, it's that big. When you see somebody and its head's there, you're like, fucking hell, if it's just nuts, it's going to hurt us. And it come over to his mate, so I was like, fucking hell, I'm going to stroke it, fuck it. So I leaned over. There's photos on Instagram and shit. I leaned over, and I was fucking stroking it, right, mate? And I was fucking stoned. And I was like, this fucking massive fucking beast and it's fucking stroking. I'm buzzing. And, mate, its tongue just come out, and its tongue licked me eye, right, mate? And I was like, fucking hell, it's massive tongue out. And I was like, it's crazy, and it mooched away. And then I'll come back over, laughing, looking at some of the photos and stuff like that. And I'm smoking, and all day I'm in the house in the night, and my eyes itching. I'm like, yeah. I've been out all day. I haven't washed my eyes since that thing licked this. And I'm like, what if it's got bacteria in its tongue or something? It's in my eyes. Or what if it's got something I'm going to have a reaction to or something? And I remember absolute panic setting in. I'm like, and I'm blitzed as well. I'm like, fucking hell, I'm Googling shit like that. It's just basically say that it's completely, it was basically just, it's like a normal animal, I was like, fucking hell, but it proper wiped us out. But I don't even know how we ended up getting on talking about the fucking
talking about animal interactions in America.
Yeah. So fucking, mate, imagine how mental it would have been, man, if you just got fucking mauled by a bear.
They were pretty bad. The worst one is so there's a video I channeled my inner 147 hours. The guy gets stuck to
between a rock and a hard place is what the book is. That the 127 hours is based on the book.
Yeah. It's on my bookcase, but I've never read it so far. I was in Northern California, and I had a shit GPS. Basically, I had an issue with my cars in America because I ended up with about 4 cars. I initially was supposed to have just 1 car. So they got the first car that I wanted was payment, fairly happy. Some sort of Chevy, can't remember what it was at the time, was good. But driving through, coming out of, where was that? Northern Colorado, truck pulled in front of us, stone came up, hit my windscreen, split, shattered it, pulled over into a weed shop car park, Mile High weed shop. So sat there literally kind of traumatized because I was doing a good speed because the roads are huge and there's 4 cars an hour. It's just, there's nothing out there. So the fact that one truck, that one stone, it was just sort of shit. So pulled into the shop, rang Alamo, I think it was. It was Alamo I was with. Got through customer service. They're like, you're in an awkward place. So what do you mean? It's like you're almost equal distance between going forward or going back, but you're in an awkward place for us to come and get you as well. So the time of it, you're probably better off driving. I'm like, so what are the rules? My windscreen's fucked. And she's like, and I was like, I've seen a lot of cars here that are damaged. She's like, yeah, insurance works slightly different out here. And I was like, so am I going to be all right with this? And she's kind of, she didn't give me a hard yes, but she didn't give me a hard no. You know what I mean? So I was like, fucking hell, right. So I'm in the weed shop car park, go check this place out. Walk in, go buy a load of like sativa gummies and a load of few different bits.
Time.
Yeah, and just highly sort of motivating, so fruity and lovely. Walk out of the shop, and obviously I'd left like all my shit in the car, so I just had like a t-shirt on the bag, and a cop drives past.
I've got it edible now. If you want a sweet, do you want a sweet?
He's a vegan though.
I don't know. Are you vegan? Sorry,
yeah.
I'll check.
Ah, nice. So I walk out. There's this cop drives in front of us, and so I've just got the bag, the RX bag that is the weed bag you get, and I'm literally trying to shove it in my t-shirt. And then the cop just points and laughs at me and drives on. And it was just almost like surreal, like, cool. Got in the car, drove, and ended up I had to drive in through to, I think it was Salt Lake City. I think at the airport at Salt Lake City was where I swapped out my car. And the car they gave us there, the engine size, it was half the size. I'd obviously calculated my budget to do 6,000 goddamn miles. You give me half the size engine, I'm not going to be able to meet my budget. The car I picked was the choice. So then I got from that, I picked it up somewhere in between, because Salt Lake was where I switched it for the Infinity. They give us this full kitted out Badman Super Infinity, like lane control, automatic lights, automatic. It was to the point, like, you turn it on drive, the roads are that straight, it corrects. Yeah. I didn't have to do shit. I was getting bored. I was like, at some point I was going to drive. Like, I had to drive in one day 900 miles to get from legal state to legal state, because I didn't want to stop anywhere, even though I didn't have anything. Yeah. So yeah, ended up having to sort of swap the cars, and then ended up with this Chevy Malibu, very low, very long thing. Yeah. And I got the shit sat nav with it because it didn't have an integrated one. Sat nav hadn't been updated in like, it got 9 years or some shit. I'm not even joking. Because then I took these turns, and I got to a point, and I channeled my inner Clarkson and guys from Top Gear. I was like, I'm at a groove bit. If I put a little log in there, I can go forward. Yeah. Right. Keep going. It's like, the road says it's only a mile this way. And I keep going and going, and I get to a point where I can't go back. And I can't go down. And it's just like a sheer cliff here, a cliff bit going up here. I can't reverse to get round. And then if I were to go back, the drop I climbed up with the log is gone. And so literally I'm like, right, I'll assess the situation. What have I got? I've got 5 litres of pasta sauce in the boot and pasta and a camping stove, because I just cook at the side of the road when I was moving that much, you know what I mean? I had shitloads of weed and like 500 litres of milliliters of water. And I was like, this is not good. It's like 94 degrees. Phone, no reception. Sat nav, no reception.
Fuck.
Yeah. So, and then I got my phone. So I sit on the dash and I roll a joint. I'm just like, right, what's worse here? How far have I actually driven back that way? How far does it say is actually this way? When was the last time when I was on that road that I actually saw somebody, if I could walk to that road? So I'm trying to do all this sort of math in my head, and then I'm just dehydrating. The more I'm sort of doing this in the car, I don't want to run the car to keep it cool. Yeah. So I'm then just trying to get in the shade, like at the other side of the car. I'm like, bobcats out here. There's shit out here that would have me. That would have me. Yeah.
Slice your fucking throat off.
So I sit on the bottom of the car and I record this video, and it's literally like, I'm kind of like, if you've seen this sort of thing,
cheeky tug at one point. Does he try it? Yes, I can't remember.
I think he does actually, because he's got the other videos on it.
I thought he did.
Paul, he needs to stay hydrated. I don't know what the man's thinking.
That's the worst thing you think. In that situation, you're hanging there, you're fucking going to lose your arm. I know what I'll do. I'm severely dehydrated. I might die. I'm going to.
Maybe he's been smart. If he's going to cough his wanking arm, bro, it kind of makes sense. It's the last time, it's the last time I see you, lad. It makes sense. So
I don't know, mate. That's the best way to look at it, really. Like, unless he's just that fucking absolutely off the planet. He looks at that photo and he just fucking all emotions.
I can imagine spending 100 hours in something like that. You probably get your brain's going to start playing with that if all you've then got is these exploits to view on a thing.
Jeez.
So record this video basically started like in case of, so it goes through this whole thing for 2 minutes. I'm kind of quite like emotional, just like, because I'm genuinely like, fuck. And then my brain just goes, how much is the premium on the car? If I write off this car, how much is that? How much is my life worth? I'm going to fuck the car. Literally fuck the car. So I walk to the edge of this ravine and kind of go, right, if as soon as I drop, I go that way, then that way, then that, and I plan it in my head, and I'm just like, and so turn on. The radio was literally, as soon as you get either in the Rockies in Colorado, high up in Oregon, or high up in California, all you get is Christian revival bullshit. Preachers. Turn it on, some preacher talking and getting hyped, and I'm just like, right, I got this. And I just commit to it. My brain just like, I'd rather write off the car and get out to come crashing down the sort of ravine and sort of go for a few hundred yards, and then I'm pulling and I'm trying to turn around a cut, and I'm not come, there's a fucking log bit where to get that bit out, fucking bit of the floor at the front, push that back up. And it kind of levels out, and then the sign says turn left. I'm like, yes. I look left, and it's just a row of bushes. And behind the bushes is like what used to be a road with trees down the middle. And it's like, I can't turn left. And then it's like, do a U-turn. It's like, can't do a U-turn. So it kept intermittently sort of coming up with the most horrible, and it's got this most obnoxious voice ever. And I'm sat and I can't figure out how to turn it off. I've got the Christian Revival speaker. I've got my own brain going, why the hell did you do this? This shortcut is not worth it. And yeah, got to a point where eventually I drive back down sort of the mountain range into the bottom, I think the Sierra, and there's just this like outpost.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those places where they've got like a shotgun above the back. They've got one petrol pump, you know what I mean? They've got all the local words, and I just kind of pull in and I'm like, compose myself. I'm like, I don't want to run in there and be like, people. It's only been like 4 or 5 hours, but the emotional roller coaster I've gone through was just like,
it's crazy, man. I did something similar, man. I was in Cyprus. I've been to Cyprus loads, you know, I've stayed out there for like a month one time. So I've been there a fair few times, and I got kind of matey with this dude who had a like a rentals place. So ended up, he used to sort us out like deals. I had a car for a couple of weeks one time, and then the next time again, he would always sort us. If it was somewhere else, he'd give us a for longer, and he would do it for fucking buttons, you know what I mean? So I would always get a quad as well. I always get a big, nice quad. And I'd just gone off by myself into the hills, you know what I mean? And just go and walk about outside. Mate, it was weird. I was smoking fags at the time, right? And I went out on the quad, and I went to get, I can't remember how much I put in, 20 euros in the pot or something like that. And I think I must have still had like 1 or 2 honours or something. So I was like, fuck it. I went right off into the hills, right, mate, for fucking ages. And I stopped, I had a look at my tank just to make sure. And I looked in, and I thought what looked like it had a fair bit of fuel in. Kept cracking on anyway, mate, straight on the road for fucking ages. And I seen down this like massive, like huge off-road bank just off the motorway into like a valley. It was like this huge kind of reservoir, it looked like. Just like the most beautiful like water ever. And I was like, fucking hell, I'm going to check that place out, you know what I mean? So I turned down, I started bombing down the like the big road. And anyway, the quad like claps out. So I bump it. It starts, but claps again. I was like, what the fuck? So I'm like free rolling. I'm like, maybe it's just overheated, you know what I mean? I'm like, not thinking the quad's fucking clapped out. I thought, it's overheated, you know, have you been out on a bike all day, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's overheating, whatever.
Yeah.
I get to the fucking bottom where this water is, right, mate? And I get off the thing, looking in the water, and I'm like, fucking hell, all these different fish and that. And I'm like, this is amazing. It's the most beautiful place ever. Chilling there, loads of goats running about in that little like hut. And I was like, fucking hell, this is sick. So I was just chilling there for ages, taking photos on my phone and shit like that. Anyway, going back to the quad, going to start it, won't start, and I'm like, fucking hell, like, this is bad news, this, like. Not at the time, like, thinking at the time, I'm like, fuck, like, how am I going to get this quad back up the bank? And how far away from anything am I? Because it's, like, you know what I mean? It was a bit later on, I'm like, fuck. So I'm like, wait, I'll pull it up. I'll pull the quad up. So I'm fucking... It's like this proper dusty fucking sandy road as well, where it's like red kind of dusty shit, weird, mate. And it was fucking so hot as well. So I think I only had a fucking vest on or something. So I'm fucking pulling this quad bike, man, wrenching it hard as I can. I'm like barely moving at its heaviest foot. I'm like, I'm fucked here. Like, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, if I leave the quad, like instantly overthinking, I leave the quad, what happens if some fucking Russians, or whoever, or some Cypriots or whatever come down here in the fucking, because in where it is in next to Paphos, is like, it's got a lot of Russian population there as well now. And I'm like, I don't know, somebody going to come down and steal this? Is it from a different city where they can pinch it and change whatever, you know? I don't know, because you get told when you're going out what you're allowed to, the distances and shit like that, you know, and I've took this fucking miles anyway. So I'm like, what happens if someone pinches it? I'm going to be fucking hit with a debt of this fucking brand new quad. So I'm like, fuck, I fucked it. I'm going to have to just fucking grind and get this up here. So I'm fucking wrenching it. This sun's beating down. I've got sweat right in my eyes. There's dust all over my face, and I'm fucking trying for ages. And I get it so far up, and I just got to a bit where it was kind of like a flat leveled off bit. And I just thought, you know what it is? I'm just pulling it off here, pulling it around the side, and just going to fucking, if somebody fucking tax it, it's the way it is, because I need to fucking get help, you know. So I'm walks for fucking ages. I'm hiking, gets right back to where the motorway was. Hiking on the fucking road for ages, and this white pickup truck comes bundling along. So I'm like, fucking mate, gets in, and he's like, basically he's trying to talk to us, and I'm like, mate, my quad bike's fucking clapped out. I need fuel. I was like, I'll pee. And he's like, Petrolina? I'm like, petrol, mate. Yeah, I need petrol. He's like, Petrolina? I was like, yeah, mate, my quad's down the bank. And he's like, fucking me. I'm like, I'll pee if you take us for petrol. Jumps in with this fucking like Greek Cypriot dude who doesn't speak any English. I'm like, on the road for fucking ages, gets to the petrol station, gets to pull away. I was like, no, whoa, you didn't, mate. I was like, you're gonna have to tie us back up. I was like, I'll give you money, you know what I mean? I was like, he said, how much? I was like, what the fuck? I was like, I think I had like 20 euros on us or something because I had money on us because I was going to get fags. Luckily, because I never took money out with this. And fucking basically ended up, I had to buy a fucking jerry can, fill it up, fucking he took us all the way bottle there, gets out, I'm thinking, fuck. Eventually, luckily enough, gets it started and fucking gets back, but it was fucking mad situation, like just a fucking from nothing, you know, like has anything mad like that? So say, you know, with obviously dealing with cannabis and traveling as much as you have, like have you ever been in any kind of bad situations? Have you been in a bad spot, like a tricky situation?
Yes, quite a lot. I mean, before my activism days, as it were, before sort of 2017, starting the club and Simple Life and writing and all of that sort of quasi-legitimate stuff. I had a lot of mates that dealt a lot of different things. Sort of, like I said, during a certain period of my youth, I like to get as fucked up as possible. And the best way to get as fucked up as possible, you buy in bulk, you keep yours and you pass on. Yeah. So by doing that then meant I met a lot of people that I wouldn't otherwise have A, a reason to be around, and B, frankly, wouldn't want to be around even at that point. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so, I've ended up in sort of situations in cars at deals that have kind of gone wrong, that have then turned to sort of violence. Luckily, these were in my late teens, so it was kind of before we somehow got to a culture of knives and guns and people really fucking each other. This was just a serious kicking and a robbery sort of job, but still being in a situation like that and not knowing what's kind of going to go down and not know kind of how to react, being seriously outnumbered. And it's terrifying. It's kind of shit, but it was a weird interaction because the respect of them was, you're not involved with this. So if you don't get involved with this, we're not going to get involved. Yeah. I had no reason to be there other than to interact with them in a business deal. So I did what I felt was right at the time, you know what I mean? Yeah. And there's been a few occasions that just, dodgy pubs, back alleys, where it's just, at any moment something horrible can go down, and it shouldn't be in that position if it was a regulated system. I mean, look at, no one's fucking each other up over a crate of Budweiser. No. It's just, it was like that in the 1920s during American alcohol prohibition. The state was fucking poisoning people, for God's sake. It was a whole heap of shit. Yeah. But I mean, since I've kind of moved into a more legitimate world, and since I've kind of matured and I've really sort of worked on myself and been able to identify the sort of culture and the people that I want to be around, those kind of experiences have lessened. They're obviously still there. I still hear a lot of horror stories from obviously people I work with, etc. Yeah. But I'm quite lucky to operate in a world that not actively discourages that kind of activity, but is working to move itself away from that. It's trying to legitimize. It's trying it's trying to create a space for an industry of the established dealers, growers, and community that's already here that, keeps all these hydro shops in business. That's a well-established community that deserves an opportunity. Yeah, for sure. Definitely, mate. I mean, fucking hell, I've ended up in some mad situations through different shit like that as well, man. I remember we were in Barcelona, and I'd been out there for 2 weeks, and the day I came back was the day my friend Ben was going out there with loads of other lads from like Leeds and different places. I think maybe one or two of them from London, and there was everyone was skateboarding, you know what I mean? So I come home and I was like fucking gutted, I was back to work that day. I was caring at the time. So I went back and found out that I actually had loads more holidays left and time off that I could use. So I ended up flying straight back out there the same day, cost as much as straight back out, stayed in their apartment on the floor. And it was I think it was the first night we were out there. I think it was the first night. Me and Ben, we were just like, right, let's go out, take our skateboards, we've gone for a cruise, gone for a beer and just fucking chill, get fucked up a bit. So we're just mooching about, and we're up near Macbeth Museum, the art museum where everyone skates. It's a famous skateboarding spot. Yeah. We bumped into some guy come over, and he's like, fucking, I've got some spare cigarettes, mate. And at the time I was smoking, I was like, yeah, fucking, I do, mate. And obviously
when you're on holiday, it's like a monopoly, isn't it? It's like, it's like monopoly money on fags and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, you take a few, mate. Anyway, so we ended up fucking mooching along along next to the museum, and I said to him, I was like, we were in bed, we talking, and I was like, honestly, about going out and getting beers and that night. I was like, oh, should we get some coke? It's like, should we get a bag of coke? I was like, let's get a bag of coke in. So I says to the guy, I was like, excuse me, mate. He's like, yeah. I was like, do you know anywhere where we can get any decent coke, And he's like, yeah, come with me. So I was like, right. So we're going to go and get some coke off this fucking shifty homeless guy, So we're following him, and he's taking us for a mooch for ages, mate. And we get next to these, get massive flats. It was like fucking dingy as fuck, like green dark, graffiti everywhere. And fucking brings the thing, door open, so you can't see him. We're walking up all these stairs right at the top floor. It's fucking graffiti everywhere. And rings this fucking bell, and the big light comes on above the fucking door. And some huge fucking guy in a vest comes to the door, and he's fucking like shouting at this fucking like the dude who's brought us there, and saying what have they kind of brought me here for, whatever. It's what I'm assuming he's saying anyway. And he's like pointing at us, and he's like putting his head down. And I'm like, we just fucking come with this guy, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Like, he's brought us in. I'm skitting out, and I'm like, fuck, we're probably going to end up in a fight here. Like, this is this, you're getting that feeling. I'm like, I was like, we're definitely going to have a fight here. Like, these are kicking off, you know what I mean? And there's some fucking, it was weird. He was at the door, right? And there's like a hallway, but there's some woman at the far end, and she's like fucking shouting, like fucking like kicking off. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, she's fucking gone mental age, sorry, Ben. I'm like, fucking, we're in a fucking bad situation, you know what I mean? So we go in anyway, and we're walking along, and where she was stood was like, there was like these arches that kind of led to where she was, but then the room opened out into like a box shape here. And when I went to the end of the like kind of walkway, there was like a table sitting there with some guy on there, and he had like this fucking knife. So I'm just like, fuck. I was like, shit, this has gone bad. And it's like fucking thingy walks in, tells us to sit there next to him. So I'm sat there, and I'm like, right, I'm just trying to assess the situation. I'm like, right, who am I going to punch? Like, who do I to try and get out of this mess? Because it's gone bad, And I'm fucking panicking like mad in my head, like, we're getting done in here, like I'm fucking skitting. And I'm like looking at the dude fucking sitting there with the knife. I'm like, fuck, I'm like, hey, Ben, I'm like, going to have to fight our way out of this mess here. Like there's like some fucking, them arches I was telling you about. It's weird. There was like these curtains, and there was like women like absolutely like fucking smacked up, like fucking in a mess in their line there. Fucked, you know what I mean? It was like a scene of fucking, what's it called? The film where they abduct the people and they're
taken.
Hostel.
Oh, Hostel.
It was weird. I was like, what the fuck? These fucking, like, that kind of like, are these fucking, you know what I mean? What's going on? Is it like a fucking mad fucking brothel or some shit? It was mad as fuck anyway. And she's looking at me, the bird, and just like shaking her head. And I'm like, she's giving me the sign. She's telling us like, this has gone bad. So in my head, I'm fucking skitting. I'm like, she's told us that this is it. Like, you know what I mean? And I fucking speak to Ben, and the fucking guy's like, fucking translate. And I'm like, fucking, you might the homeless guy translate. And he's like, well, what you here for, basically? I'm like, fuck. I'm like, we've just come for some coke. This fucking guy's just brought us some fucking gear. He told us that we'd come here for gear. Knocks a fucking chip off this fucking rock of coke, smashes it up on the table, and he's just like, and I was like, well, he's like, do it now. So I was like, fuck. I was like, Ben, we're going to have to sniff this whole bag between us now. So I was like, fuck it. I was like, hang on then. So I blasted my off, but big line, big fat train line, blasted it, and then fucking Ben did his and just sitting there. It was just like, right, see you later. And so I was like, fucking hell, like, fucking Bill. So when we're leaving, I'm like, I cannot believe like that situation now. I'm like, honestly, like, fucking how if we ended up there? Like, for all they could have thought we were grasses and just absolutely fucked us up there, you know what I mean? And we could have done note about it. Fucking pure skits.
Yeah, again though, it shows the system, because this is why I advocate for like a sensible drug policy for everything, because cocaine is everywhere. It is not the elitist drug that it was perceived to be in the fucking 80s. It is everywhere. Of
course it is.
And we need to address, when you drink alcohol and you take cocaine, it mixes in your body to create cocaethylene, which is a massive euphoriant.
Yeah.
So until we address the science of that, and we look at the reasons why people are mixing them, why people have polydrug relationships anyway, why they want to take different substances, is they get something from it. And so the one responsibility we really have, if we're going to have a government, is for them to provide safe access and to reduce any potential harm or risk that these substances pose. Because then if you would have chose to go, let's have a little bit of coke, you should literally be able to go to a cocaine cafe like you can in some places in Colombia and wherever else. And you can get a little bit of locally grown cocaine. It's not gone through slave trade. No kids were harmed in it. It's not gone up someone's arse. It's not whatever else. You know what I mean?
No, it's right. You're right.
And that's how we reduce the criminality. You don't get rid of the drugs. Look, the UN in 1961 said by the end of the 1980s, we will live in a drug-free world.
Yeah.
Look at the trajectory of drug consumption around the world just skyrocketed after that statement. It was a joke. The harder you try and oppress this, the more prevalent. It's like we're pushing down and it's coming out of the sides. So we've got to a point now where the youth, 14, 15-year-olds, are glorifying dealer culture, are glorifying a gang lifestyle in a way that you or I, when we were young and when we first got introduced, it just wasn't there. It wasn't there. There was dealing and there was a culture and you knew where to buy from and there was people that were avoiding.
Shifting behind the thing, you wanted a neon.
Yeah, but even then it was kind of safe. You'd have a rumor of, 3 years ago, like Enoch, blah, blah. And then you'd get to the guy and he'd say, no, actually, you just told me off. It was a controlled environment. Sure. Now, because of what Neil Woods, who was the UK's most prolific undercover cop, for like 16 years, they put this guy on the street and he worked his way up, found the worst dealers in the UK. Really interesting dude. Basically then had this kind of a revelation and was like, I've fucked up more lives than I've helped. He wrote these 2 books with this guy G.S. Raffaelli, The War on Drugs and Drug War, I think. Good Cop, Bad War and Drug War. 2 really fascinating things that talk about this from a police perspective.
And is that a book, did you say?
The 2 books. It's Good Cop, Bad War and sorry, it's a bit of a confusing title. Good Cop, Bad War and Drug Wars. And it talks about like how we've got this mechanism like county lines and dealing. He uses an analogy in that where he speaks of the arms race. So back in the 60s, 70s, there's a couple of dudes that grew weed and passed it around, or a few people who were in the know. And there were just some guy who smoked. You went in his house and there was weed leaves all over and he lived kind of a hippie lifestyle and whatever else. An obvious kind of guy, and he went to him and he knew, and people just knew him and he ignored him. Then as soon as we started arresting people like that, somebody else came in, which meant the price went up. So then all of a sudden, criminal enterprise goes, how much is that now worth? Let's have a look at that. Then they start this arms race. But then as soon as one is taken out, to control the market, you need to be more violent, more aggressive. You know what I mean? You need to take over more. And they've then adopted this aggressive cannibalistic capitalism into the drug war. So that then these systems are now the second generation dealers, the guys who did their bit on the street in our time, they're now hiring kids to then shop drugs everywhere. So they'll literally send them in another town. They'll put them in a house with a dependent user, someone who they can go literally, here's your supply for the week and then some. Let this kid sit here for 9 hours a day for 10 days and all people will come and buy deals off him all day. Then he'll go back and take the money back to the gang. So all of those mechanisms we can remove. This whole issue with knife crime and postcode violence, it's directly consequential of this because we've skirted around the rules. Whereas a lot of those people should be removed from this. They're criminals through and through.
Sure.
They may have allowed supply to occur and maybe consequently helped people use cannabis to treat conditions and whatever. Also just enjoy cannabis and create a good culture. But up the chain, it's causing serious harm. It's promoting human trafficking. They're promoting dangerous grow sites where they like steal electricity, where they use harmful pesticides and fertilizers on the products. So they end up creating a dangerous product that is highly profitable, but is not good for the consumer. Whereas all of that can be dealt with if we just regulate. You find the good people, as we were talking about before. You have that kind of commission and go, oh God, you've been doing this 20 years, and then literally like 100, 200 people can stand up and go, yeah, that guy's the shit. Again, he deserves to be on a board figuring out the process of what this looks like. We don't need these 50-year-old fucking venture capitalists coming in and going, oh, I'm a cannabis expert. But where the hell are you? You're the same guy that kicked your son out for smoking weed. You're the same guy that voted year after year for policies that criminalize people like me. It's bullshit. No, you need to bring the people up. There's millions of us around the world.
Actually experienced that.
We've been here for decades. Not these guys that are going, how much money can I make? I want to advocate for CBD now. It's like, fuck you. Fuck you and your private education and your opportunities and your fucking white privilege and your classist privilege and everything fucking else. There is entire swaths of communities, generations of people, third and fourth unemployed, because their community has been so destroyed by the drug war. It's not, I'm lucky. Again, I'm quite articulate. I'm white and I fall into a good few groups that mean that police kind of look at me and go, he's not really a threat. Whereas if I'd said half the things I've said on the BBC or on platforms like Victoria Derbyshire and things like that, I'd have been targeted and arrested long ago. I'd be a dangerous threat. And it's bullshit. That's, again, another reason to advocate that I choose to advocate for this, because there are millions of people who have come before me who've sacrificed, made it so I can sit here comfortably and smoke a joint on the internet.
Yeah, definitely. So now you're saying about, like, obviously the position you were in as a kid. Do you think there should be more help in kind of like situations like that? Do you know what I mean? Do you think there should be more? And if so, what do you think could be done to kind of help more?
Again, I may end up sounding like a broken record here, but ending the drug war, if we end the stigma around other substances, there's a quote by a comedian, I can't remember who it is, who said that if cannabis was legal, so many children would have grown up with stoned fathers instead of drunk ones. And I'm not dissing alcohol. I'm never going to say that you should prohibit any substance, but we know from statistics that there is a much higher propensity of violence when people are intoxicated. And when that translates down to the way you raise children, there was an interesting study a few years ago that showed that children have a negative reaction with drunk parents, good or bad, whether you act positive or not. Their brain set watches you change and you become dangerous to them. They're vulnerable. They've had a certain idea of who you are. They've grown to know your patterns, your routines, and who you are. You're then inebriated around them. This causes a distrust. And from that point, it can then develop a trauma that lasts a lifetime. Most of the trauma that we all face that builds our inbuilt sort of stigmas and prejudices, they come from youth that we don't even recognize. And it's that sort of perpetuation of it. And I think that to help protect children like me in a point like that is the sale of these substances could subsidize mental health. It could subsidize intervention. It could subsidize, and not only that, it would then allow for, as you said, you were saying before about consumers then have a more of an open mindset. So then if we can change the way we address child abuse, because there are so many claims that go unaddressed, there are so many positions where a child is put there with their narrative and an abuser, especially abusers in power, whether it be teachers, priests, or the religious icons, or whomever else that have that authority that are looked up to, they're believed 99% of the time over that child.
For sure,
and the perpetuation of that damage cycle, it ruins lives. It writes off lives. I am one of the very few lucky ones that have been able to live through the kind of experiences that I've lived through and come out the other side not so bitter and so hateful that I would seek to destroy the world. I wish to spend the rest of my life to better the world. I joke about it with fellow activists all the time of going, what are you going to do when the war's over? Because it's that kind of mentality. We're not living right now. We're fighting. We're in the trenches. I often say that I was put to war because the state declared a war against me. They can't have a war on drugs because you can't criminalize inanimate objects. What you can do is criminalize the people who consume and use them. So they've declared a war on me. They've made me an enemy combatant. How can I not take up arms? Like I said, I'm a pacifist, so I'm not going to go fight them. It wouldn't do me any harm. It wouldn't do me any good to physically go and try and take on the monolith of government. But if I can be articulate, if I can write, if I can produce podcasts, if I can speak on other platforms and get this conversation going it's a snowball effect. Exactly that. And then when others kind of go, what? And they hear some of the things I've got to say and it sparks that seed of creativity and they go away and they kind of think about it and they go, shit, this and this and this. And it sparks that curiosity we were speaking of before. And when we feel that, we run with it. This is why when we see a TV show and something goes in us, we watch the whole fucking series that night because we're starved for it. We're desperate for that genuine curiosity inside of ourselves. And I think this is the biggest part that ending the war on drugs could have in our culture is the acceptability and the normalization of the option to just play with your consciousness, to in a safe environment, in a safe situation with harm reduction advice and education to go, I'm going to fuck myself up. I'm in a position of enough experience and enough knowledge base and actually direct first-hand experience of good and bad trips that I can go to the woods, take a high dose of LSD, build a fire, and I'm not worried that what if I burn myself or I pick up the log thinking it's a whatever. I've not conditioned my brain into that situation. I've experienced enough diversity of the experience to be able to utilize it as a direct mechanism. So several times a year, I'll go to the woods, especially the start of spring and the end of winter. The start of spring, the mid of winter, and sometimes over summer. But summer just everywhere fills with people. It's it's not as private. But that kind of as the light cycles change, it helps that reset of yourself because we drag this thing they call it seasonal affective disorder, SAD. And you kind of feel it in yourself. The pagans and that used to do mushroom rituals into the autumn. And what it would do with the again cause neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, and it would prepare them for the darker months, and then they would celebrate the same to come out of the darker months.
I've got a few grams still of Liberty caps there. They'd be dry as fuck between there. A couple of weeks and be camping back.
Perfect fucking things. And again, Liberty caps are just so ubiquitous and so available, and so powerful for something so small. And again, they grow at those cycles. So it's again, nature provides it. You look at the tribal cultures around the world, they all have these rites of passage that involve something, whether it be anything from a tobacco ceremony to ayahuasca, to the Bufu frog sort of ceremony, and all kinds of stuff. They're all
what's it called? Like, I can't remember the word for it. I know. It is all over the world. Like, what's the thing? There's another one, man. I was just trying to say the word for it. Really interesting one. I'll have to.
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
It'll come back to us, but
it just, they do it as a rite of passage for an age thing. But then in the older culture, before the war on drugs and all these legislations that criminalized it,
peyote,
peyote
ceremonies.
They've long since won protection in America. There's a woman. What's your last name? Sonia, that I went to go stay with. She runs like this Facebook group in America. It's got like a million followers. Huge presence online. Her husband and that, they run a farm as well. They took us on the farm. I walked into a house and she's a Native American, a part Native American, and nice. They have a right to then grow peyote. So they had this windowsill, this cactus box windowsill. They were in Mesa in northern Colorado, and it was just all these peyote, and they're like, we get the buttons. So we've planted them, so we get the buttons every year. This one.
So they're legally allowed to do that because
they're allowed heritage. So there's religious protections of certain things. So ayahuasca technically isn't illegal anywhere, really, because it's protected by religious right. It was written into the 61 Convention that religious ceremonies would allow for certain things to be protected. So then it's just a case of proving cultural use. So there's some guys in Illinois that got pretty smart to this years ago and went, First Church of Cannabis. So they get there's like a subsect of like 10 rules or something you've got to follow to be a church. And so you're going to congregate together once a week. So they're not get together Sunday. They've got to have a ceremony 420. So at 420 they all smoke. And they created all of the rules around this, and they created this social space where they were able to provide cannabis to each other and consume it and kind of exploit that. So you've had obviously the fight with for Rastas and Rastafarianism to be able to recognize cannabis as sacrosanct. But then if you look to a lot of the ancient cultures that pervade most of the modern world, say like the flower of life in ancient Egypt was a DMT-given plant. Again, to get sort of back to DMT. A lot of the things that are written to the Bible are quite obviously high-end drug experiences. You know what I mean?
What's the one when he's next to the tree and
when he's in the burning bush?
He's fucking, it's crazy, isn't it? It's like.
But there's quite a few people, I think Graham Hancock and a few others included, speak of it as that's DMT or that's
that's what I would have like perceived it as, by the way it sounds. Obviously you're saying you smoke DMT a lot of times. What kind of experiences have you had on it? And if you can you? I know obviously it's one of them things. It's like if you've experienced a certain trip, it's really hard to put a pin on it. But can you, for the best part, like explain some of your trips that you've had on it and what you've came away from it feeling like?
I suppose I've gone through many pens. I've gone through many different sort of syntheses and batches that, again, people seem to gift me substances when I go places, especially people who produce their own and literally like, I really want you to try this. And it's like, brilliant. Yeah, love that. And so I work in kind of a gift or trade economy as well. I mean, you get access to a wide variety of different things.
For sure.
And because of that, diversity in the compounds is the true diversity in experience. But even when I've say got one dose or one thing into a pen and then you get multitude of doses, the variety between them, the set and setting is so important, where you take it and the mindset you take it in. So if I know I'm going to go for a DMT experience, which is only 15 to 20 minutes, I'll prepare for 2 days up to it in terms of my brain. So I'll clear out all the crap. I won't let a lingering thought go there. So I'll meditate more. I'll sort of be mindful, and then I'll not eat the day of the sort of the experience to sort of
have a clean
to sort of just feel cleansed and light. The worst thing to do is at the height of a trip is just to feel sluggish from the horrible huge dinner you just had.
That's when the fucking paranoia sets in.
But it's also when you can get a loss of, not a loss of, but you don't become aware of then your bowels or your bladder or anything like that. So you don't want to have the thought of, am I? you don't want any of that uncomfortability or that whatever. So you just want to be calm as possible. So I like literally took on some candles and shit, low level light, and sit and like in a lotus sort of position, meditate for a bit, and then smoke, calm my brain as much as possible. Because I've made the mistake before of I'm just gonna, and then just have such a woof experience, and then be like, wait, there's people and the stuff, and it's so disorientating, and it can be really hard to gain anything meaningful from it. You'll still end up with a positive response neurologically. So in terms of then an antidepressive and anxiolytic effect for days afterwards, you'll just kind of feel I described it when I did a documentary with the BBC as a positive hangover. Yeah. And you just kind of feel a bit better for a while. They're discovering now with neurology that it's actually boosting certain neurochemicals, and they're starting to get to the science of it. But the really beneficial part of this is that cognitive, powerful experience. I mean, I've trips at for a lot of people as well. And there's a friend of mine that I've trips at last year with, and they were going through a really difficult time. Lockdown was really hard on them. They couldn't quite figure stuff out. So sat with them while they had a DMT experience, and they just quietly cried throughout it, just tears, just streaming, big smile, just tears. And then afterwards they were breathless with how happy they were. Yeah. They were so content, and it was the feeling inside. So she set her intention in it, and then went to, this is what I want from it. So this is what I'm going to try to achieve from it. And it was a powerful bonding sort of experience to watch another human being be that vulnerable, because it is. You wipe out your sense of self. You completely woof for like say 15 to 20 minutes, and you either get this kind of in-depth internal, or you get this kind of accelerated out there experience. For some people, they feel that they leave themselves. For others, they feel they go infinitely inside of themselves. And for me, most often it is that kind of infinite experience of inside of that. I consume it, and I go inward, and I become almost nothing. I can't feel my parameters. I can't, but quite often I like to then open my eyes, especially if I've gone through closed eyes meditation and then smoked and then open, and then to see the different geometry and to experience the same world in a different way, to have that kind of amplified experience. But then a really extreme dose, it's almost like a pass out sort of experience. It's all encompassing.
And have you done huge doses as well?
It doesn't suppress respiration, so you don't have a fear of anything like that. So the first time I had that full pass out experience,
that's what I'm scared of. Sorry for interrupting you, but I've done it, and we used it was the crack pipe style, as if it was a crack pipe, and we'll fucking put the DMT in there and we'll fucking heat it through. But we'd had it and it had already been used a fair bit, and it's harsh anyway. And this was like fucking absolutely blowing your fucking throat out. So I was getting the hit of it and fucking like geometric patterns in me fucking head, and seeing little like kind of like as if they were like kind of shadows of movements, like jittery movements and stuff like that. But I didn't have nowhere near enough to fucking like, at least go somewhere else fully physically feeling it, you know what I mean? So what kind of doses have you and when you have done them, so you were saying there about it not stopping your breathing, because that's one thing that happened to me when I had too many Liberty caps one time. I had a load of Liberty caps, and that's exactly what happened to me. That now the panic of I'm not gonna, you know what I mean?
So that's not, it's the psilocybin, which is what you derive from psilocybin when your body consumes it. It doesn't suppress respiratory effects. It's only really opioids that will actually suppress. I mean, there are other substances like cocaine that can, in some extreme circumstances, cause extreme tachycardia. So the heart rate will go so fast it can cause physical structure problems. It could lead to heart failure or a heart attack, etc.
What would that be? Like really high levels, or
really high levels.
Like if you were smashing those.
If you were like days and days into a binge, but then it's down to your individual physiology. It's not fair for us to ever say that, oh my god, this girl took an ecstasy pill at 17 and died, therefore every 17-year-old girl will die if they take a pill. We can't extrapolate that. There's so many subjective. There's so much more that we need to take sort of into consideration. But with the sort of the mushroom or whatever experience it is, it's the panic cycle inside of yourself. So you kind of get stuck and you have that conversation, and it's a lot of people. It's weird because I've had conversations recently with people who don't talk to themselves. And I'm kind of like, so what do you mean? And so
what happens then when you get a reaction to the way your body's feeling or something? You have to tell yourself.
How do you?
My conception of it, it's like I'm telling myself,
say
breathe. You know, like you're saying to yourself all the time, like, it's just the fucking mushrooms kicking in. It's all right. And I'm like, and then everything's like, whoa. And like, fucking hell, you know what I mean? You have to talk to yourself. You have to tell you, like, no, I'm seeing this because of what I'm doing. I'm all right. And I couldn't understand how you would get through something like that without talking to yourself.
Well, I just mean in general sort of everyday life. So I've extrapolated from that when I've done psychedelics with those people, they tend to have more of a panic reaction.
So do you mean every day? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. In every day. Because so what happens is that Freud kind of got a few things wrong. Right, Sigmund Freud, when he sort of created modern psychoanalytics. And so he came with the concept of the id, the superego, and the ego. Yeah. And so the 3 states of consciousness. I kind of call it the head, the heart, and the hara. So you got your head, which is kind of a logical processing place, your heart, which is the emotional center, and your hara, which is sort of an old term for instinct. Yeah. And you get that when, you know, you're going to cross a street and all of a sudden you step back and a car goes. It's just, you can never explain it. But you do something or you act in a way, you know, when something falls and you grab it and you didn't even, that again, it's this instinct, this core intelligence that's going off there. Same with the heart of the way you're emotionally driven to things, where you get this way you're like, I don't want to buy this. I shouldn't buy this. And you're emotionally connected to it, but then buying it leads to, you meet somebody at the cashier that leads to this, that way. There's another sort of intelligence at work there. And then your brain is obviously working to its own rhythm as well. But we get lost in that thought process. And the entheogenic experience, even cannabis to a lesser degree, slows you down enough that you can kind of sit as the superego, which is like the same you could get in meditation, or you'll probably find it even in fighting, is when you're moving, you move, your brain moves so fast that you go, do this now and do that now. And you're actually you're watching you as if you're above it.
For sure.
And it's that kind of that separate experience. Yeah. And so then the id was described as the impulse, and Freud was far too focused on sex and drugs and sort of deviant impulse, I think was the way he sort of described it. And he got too focused in that and lost the potential benefit and good within it. And I think that as you say, having these experiences, these things start to talk more. It can get muddled. And you can end up with people going like, stop it, shut up, because they can't. They're used to just them. That one little narrative is, and I do this, and I do that, and I do this. Not going, why am I doing this? I wonder what happens if I do that and that. And all of a sudden, that kind of explosion of neurological activity for some people can be scary, and it can lead to temporary psychosis. And so people can have these difficult responses to these substances. I myself, like in chase of that kind of loss of DMT experience, because one night I decided I'm going to smoke in bed. I'm going to meditate, do a usual sort of routine, really calm down, not look at any screens, go into my bedroom in dark, and I'm going to smoke and kind of curl up. And it was so fucking beautiful.
Was it?
It was. I felt like presence. I felt like all the people who'd ever loved me came and just cuddled into me one at a time, and it was just all this energy. And the covers were over me, and it was beautiful lights, and it was just. And I wept, and I cried of just happiness. Like, you know, when you were late, this kind of, they call it the vagus nerve. This cluster of nerves goes woof, and you're alive, and every breath is just raw and real. And I was just kind of, and then I fell asleep in it, and I just woke up the next morning just like, oh my God. And so then a few days later,
and
then some. A few days later, I tried to replicate the experience again, and I was like, right, I'll hold longer, and I'll go longer. And I was kind of a bit cocky, and it was very egoic and very selfish of an experience. And I was sat in my living room, and I had like 2 trips simultaneously. And I went back to one of my first experiences, sat with a guy who used to run a vape company, where we Spannabis, and he was giving us his DMT. And I was sat with this guy, Nicholas, and he made honey from cannabis, from bees that we was getting to pollinate from hemp. And it was just weird sort of sitting, we were smoking this here. And I could hear him talking. And in this moment of this trip, I was like watching myself through this endless tunnel, sat on this couch again behind the stall, watching the people kind of walk past and just listening and have the most benign conversation with this other guy. And I was like, and then the other one started, and it kind of slotted on top of it. And and everywhere I looked, it was the tunnel of just this, it was the weirdest kind of, and again, I had the right, breathe. I know what I'm doing. This is just a drug, right? It's DMT. And I remembered like every other time I've come back from, then my brain went, what about persistent hallucinogenic disorder and things like and those kind of things.
I'm stuck like this forever.
Yeah. And I started understanding, but no, don't panic. How many times have you talked people down? How many times have you had this bad experience? And and so so I talked myself around a bit, and then it kind of stopped, and I went, right, and it was like, so I'll put that one back on the shelf. In my brain, it's that cartridge. So for ages, I ended up going to get another cartridge, and it wasn't.
It was all the same strength as well. Sorry,
if you get it from the same sort of
the same dealer sends you the same
person. I mean, typically it's people that will then produce things like they've become a bit more into dealer lifestyle, as it were. But for a long time, to get things like liquid bottles of acid, or to get those DMT carts or stuff like that, or say Changa, salvia sort of thing, you would have to go to a very specific person. So this kind of kept it in a certain group.
Yeah.
Whereas now the awareness of DMT, I think, has exploded on the culture in the same way that LSD did in the 1960s. So everyone wants to try it. Everyone wants to give it a go. And I've seen people that are been anti-drugs their whole life, but like, I'm quite interested in that. Give it a go. I mean, there's a dealer who I shall not name from ends around my way, who's very notorious, and for many years was a nasty piece of work, very violent, very vicious, just sadistic as a kind of person. Walked into a room of his mates, was smoking a pipe in a room. What's this like? Giving a Billy big bollocks. Pipe was packed with DMT for the whole room. Pussies, show you how it's done. Smashed the whole pipe in. Literally,
never come back.
He hit the floor. Had this experience. Got back up, apologised, left, and is now, last I heard of it, was making amends. Was basically just going around going, I've been a horrible person. I can't believe who I've been. And just, so in an instant, he had 20, 30 years of therapy, of all the medications you could do, change your environment, whatever. In that moment, he will have been so locked into his own soul with no escape. He wouldn't have had the ability to gesture, to do anything. Mm-hmm. He was just having to. And DMT is a wonderful thing because it's such temporary. It's like, but it's also like Einstein's theory of sort of relativity in terms of when it's applied to time. Yeah. If you try and resist that experience, it's going to give you 6 hours. If you go, I'm loving this, it'll kick you out in 2 minutes. You'll be out the other end. It's a weird thing. LSD does the same. That if you try and resist it, it's going to give you that harsh ride. You have to literally kind of just go.
Harsh rides, like.
I mean, it's okay, cool. Right, what do I need? I need water. Right, occasionally I need to go to the bathroom. Might need some food midway through if I get the munchies. I need something to occupy my brain. Let's settle. We can do this. Whereas if you're like, no, I don't want this, you'll panic yourself. You'll literally build it up. And I've seen people getting horrible
ones. Really scary, really fucking scary ones where it's like, right, I need a fucking ambulance kind of fucking shit, panic, like fuck, battled through it like a soldier, you know what I mean? Crashed my car, fucking the next day. This is not the kind of time I've just crashed my car recently there. I've just crashed a car. I don't crash cars all the time. I crashed the other one. I just bumped something. I had a fucking, this was years ago. It was that night. I had the first time I did Liberty Capital, like super chilled, nice time. And then the next time we done 2 and just lost the fucking plot. And it was the next morning from that, driving home, still seeing like little purple and gold leaves falling from the fucking side. No, did I really just say that? I'm like out of this now kind of thing. And like fucking bumped my car on the way back. Fucking nightmare. But I've had some fucking mad times on them. I mean, like, what you were saying about earlier about camping in the woods and that. I try to, as much as I can, all year round, we can out in wild camps through a few different places, up the lakes and stuff like that. It's good to get away, you know what I mean? I wish I could experience that. When you were saying about camping in, was it Colorado? When you were in the bear season? My auntie had a log cabin it was called Big Bear in California, big mountain there, and it was fucking amazing. Like, I would love to have been able to do something like that, like gone out in the wild there, but it's fucking mental. Like you did that for like 3 weeks.
It was I was out for 5 weeks, then I flew back and went to Toronto. When I was in Oregon, I got a log cabin while I was out there in how's it called? Rhododendron, I think was the tiny place. And it was wicked. So it was an Airbnb. I looked at it and it looked like a rustic old log cabin outside. Inside, Wi-Fi, wood stove in the middle. It had like a waffle machine, full fridge, like every goddamn thing. Like there's one shop, one weed shop.
Kill me now, I'm done. This is it.
and one bar, and you went in. It was just one room, so it was like a lush living room here, little reading nook here, huge kitchen, and then a back porch. Right. No gate. Like the wilderness was there, so I had like blue jays and squirrels and fucking all this shit just there. And I'd stop for 3 days because I had to write up what I'd already kind of done and do some promo work for the next sort of thing I was doing. So I was like, right, I want to pick this place in the middle of absolutely nowhere, have that kind of experience.
Were you logging it? Were you taking when you were saying there, but was taking notes. What would you do there? Would you just write about your whole experiences?
Yeah, I think I can't remember which outlet I wrote it for, but I wrote like a blog of my experiences of the road trip.
See if you can find
it. Try and dig it out. There's a lot of the stuff I've tried to transfer on the website, but a lot has just kind of got lost because I don't remember where
so what's the website?
It's thesimpleLife.com.
I'll have to check it out. I'll check it out.
But little anecdote for the Oregon place, it was an Airbnb, and I turned up and the woman went, why are you in the States? And I went, I'm a cannabis activist. I'm working my way to a festival in Seattle. And she's like, oh my God, you got to try the weed shop down here. It's run by like my cousin's nephew or something. He said that I've sent you, look at you a discount. It was the one weed shop in town. So I drove like 300 yards down to the one weed shop. Cause you had to I was in a section, there was just a huge forest, a highway. All the stuff was there, and I had to get on, go like up like a mile, and then back down to the thing. So it was just I couldn't cross. Just got in, drove to Rounding over, pulled in, sort of thing. I was like the only guy they'd seen for like 5 hours. They're like, "Yo, you're right, buddy." As soon as I spoke like with a British accent, they were just like, "Hey," and was talking for hours. And I ended up like, I was like, "Oh, I picked up this vape in somewhere else in Colorado." I was like, "It's got a really obscure end," and he was like, "I've got a promo. You can have that." And he gave us this vape. He gave us loads of stuff. He let us like play with loads of stuff, and because he had like no other customers, and he told us so much stuff. And it was just such a lush experience. So then like, all I did was I ate like huge vegan waffles, blueberry waffles every morning with like ice cream and stuff. Like it was just,
it's a fucking life, man, isn't it, man?
It was glorious, man.
Maple syrup, I would have been in my heaven there, just out like that. Like I love America. I mean, I've been a few different places.
Very big out there. Like everything is like going to get food. Like, I'll have a small of this.
It's fucking crazy.
Oh, that's today's food. It was so weird. The portions and like the scope of it as well. Because it was everywhere I wanted to drive was like I'd look at it on a map and go, oh, that's just like two counties over, and put it into the maps, and it's like 400 miles. It's like, what? But then you look at the road, it's like there's 3 lefts and a right.
Yeah.
It's just that vast. And it was just like driving over the Rockies, like literally up, and you got like snow-capped mountains, and then you come down and you can see down in the deserts of like California and that. And it's just
especially
the change in the climate. And it is, you've got the miles that I covered, I basically touched more, apart from like a rainforest-esque, I touched most of the things that you'd experience in the world of like desert and dense forest. I mean, driving through the redwoods and that was spectacular. I went to meet a farmer and did like an interview and stuff. He walked us through and took us to go meet like his, because I was trying to understand about how trimmigrants work.
Yeah.
So a trimmigrant, like people that fly over and they work a season. So they come for harvest and they work their way up through the farms and you stay. And there's a big thing of like them getting abused and getting fucked over because a lot of them are illegal or stay on tourist visas, etc. And this kind of causes problems. And we were talking for a bit, and he was like, "So, how did you drive here? Did you come down this blah blah road?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Did you hug a redwood?" And I was like, "What?" He said, "You've got to." And he was a serious face I've ever seen. He's like, "You have got to hug a redwood." And I was like, "All right." And the whole way driving back to in my brain, I'm like, "I'm gonna hug a redwood." And I just see this tree in my brain, just like, "Fuck, that's the tree." Then clearly, literally in the forest, in the densest forest you've ever seen, I just see that tree, and I'm just like, shit. And they just called at me, and I was just like, "Go on, I'll go see this fucking tree." And then I kind of walked up very sheepishly and shy, and because of the scale of the fucking thing as well, it makes you feel, again, same with the moose, that interaction, small but not vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? It just made me feel in my place. The same with the whole trip of America, because again, in the UK, you drive for 5 hours, you basically touch every side of it. You can't really have an overnight drive in the UK, whereas over there, the vastness of it and the fact that I could drive for an hour and a half and not see a single vehicle was so, like it was oddly comforting. But it was
but eerie as well.
Yeah, it was Henry Rollins who said that it was that loneliness adds a certain beauty to life. And I think it's that kind of feeling of you're alone, but it tells you who you are. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do the trip, is so that in those vulnerable states, when I met that moose, when I went camping, when like I got pulled over 45 minutes into driving to Colorado, because I landed, was like, right, I can do this, get the car here, hotels here, weed shops there, job done. Boom, went to drop my bags off. In between, I didn't realize I had to drive through basically rush hour downtown Denver. Oh, fuck it. Wrong side of the car, wrong side of the road.
Oh, not a
30 hours in, and my brain was just like, I can do it. And it pulls out and just smashes it. I was doing so good. Bear when I've never driven on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car. And
busiest, worst time ever.
I get through, like, I have to loop into like the outskirt of Denver to come to this shout out Fox Cannabis dispensary, and I'm literally two blocks away, right, at a light, and I didn't realize the lane I was in is right only. There's this blacked out Jeep next to me, right, and he's going straight. Lights go, I got to go straight. He pips, and I'm just like, all right, it's all right, buddy. Put my foot a bit faster to get in front of him. Blues like lights up in like 16 fucking places. Oh my fucking god! So I indicate and I pull over, and I'm just like, I'm over caffeinated because all I've done is drink coffee for 30 hours. I haven't really eaten anything. All I wanted was to go get some good weed, go back to my hotel, pay my $200 fine. It's basically what you pay $200 fine, $250 fine at the hotel, and you smoke weed in your room and don't call the cops. It's a ridiculous system. But anyway, this cop's approaching us, hand on his fucking gun like this. I'm looking in the mirror. The slyest getting right. He's got a passport, driver's license, just laying him on my lap, and I'm literally like this. And he sort of taps on the window, and then as soon as he hears that I'm British, stance just changes instantly in his body. He drops, and he's like, "Oh, so what you in the country for?" So then I'm just lying my ass on my holiday. I said, "Where you going?" I'm not going to say the weed shop. You know what I mean? So I'm coming up with the shit. I'm just going shopping, picking up supplies, sort of thing. And I'm like, I'm really sorry, officer. I've literally been in the country for 45 minutes. I've just picked up the car. I misread the sign, sort of thing. He gave us back my shit.
Did he say that? Is that what you had done? Did he say like?
He said, you made a traffic violation. And I was just like, I know that now, but when I approached the sign, I'm a bit tired, obviously, from the flight sort of thing. It's time zone change, and I really played into it. And I really was kind of like, this guy's got a fucking gun. Do you know what I mean? And even with his body armor and everything, even if he was, I can't remember how hench he was, but he looked the biggest thing I've seen. Do you know what I mean? So that guy could end me, and we don't even need to make an excuse after that damn time. So yeah, and he then pulls out a business card with his details on, writes a little note on the back. I can't remember what it is. I've got it at home in my thing box. And he hands it back to me. Mm-hmm. He says, "If you've got any problem while you're in Colorado, give me a ring. No, sorry, if you've got any problems while you're in Denver, contact me." So basically, I then found out later that the cops give these, they're basically discretion cards. So it's they give it to a person that if they get fucked with another cop, you go, this cop, and you contact him, and he goes, I've already pulled him for a traffic violation. He's a novice thing. It's not official. That's it's very sick. They end up they exploit it in a lot of ways. So, but for me, it worked out well. Yeah. But I never needed it again. I drove fucking well after that. I covered 6,000 miles, and I didn't do jack shit. I made sure of it. Drove around. He was like, "You know where you're going?" I'm like, "Yeah, around the corner." And he's like, "Go on." And I waited. He moved immediately and fucked off. And I kind of took a few breaths. I was like, right, put the aircon on because I'm dripping sweat. Oh my god! Drive around to the weed shop, and the woman at the weed shop was lovely. And she just reassured me of everything. And she let me, there's a picture on my Instagram of like, I've got this 2-pound bag of weed. And she just gave me, she let us play again with all the stuff. Because again, as soon as she said I was British, she played into me. It's just like, oh man, we never get anybody up here. And it was just such a cool experience. But the juxtaposition of some of the dangerous experiences I had that I didn't until retrospect kind of realize how dangerous they were. And some of the connections that I made in terms of friendships and stuff were wonderful. People let us stay, invited us to stay in the house. I made breakfast, the family tables and stuff, and to get that intimacy,
friends for life.
Yeah, because I didn't when I went to California, I didn't go to LA. I deliberately missed out. I didn't go to commercial weed places. I didn't go to the big hubs of everywhere because I didn't want to see what they were trying to portray. I wanted to go to the mom and pop. I wanted to go to the people who built the industry and find out for myself before I come back to the UK and go legalization, because that's not my chant now. Mine it's deschedule. If we remove it from the criminal codes at the minute of the laws in this country, we legitimize the people that are already here. If we create legalization, we just invite these monopolistic conglomerates to come in, these huge companies that just buy the industry and set it all up. And they have shareholders, and they'll have an all-white board of 40, 50, 60-year-old blokies that came from banking or came from finance, came from whatever else. It's ridiculous, man.
It is. It's crazy. Like, fuck now. Mad as fuck. It is a good way to think of it. Like, so what would you say then in that situation? Like, What's the best outcome then? Like, I know you
again, like I said, I think if we not under the current interpretation, I suppose, of decriminalization, because what happens there, same as just happened in Oregon, they've just decriminalized personal possession of drugs. Yeah. But what they've actually done, when you look at the rules, is decriminalized about half a dose to a dose of certain drugs. Yeah. So if you go to your dealer and you buy your week's worth of drugs and you get stopped, you're still going to prison. Do you know what I mean? If you then have over a certain threshold, you're going to get done for proceeds of crime. You're then also going to hit federal law rather than state law, which means you're going to disappear into a serious system. Yeah. And that's just kind of a university of criminality. You go in with a cannabis charge and you come out understanding how to do racketeering, how to people traffic, how to do other things. And you move into that echelon, because once you're criminalized, the legitimate world says you're a bad person. Yeah, now. You've got a thing written on your record that says you are bad. Yeah. Whereas what we should be looking at of going, what we said before, if you then had a conviction, you got caught with a 10,000 plant grow. The guy ran an empire worth 5 million. Why is he in a prison cell? Yeah, if there's then crimes around violence or whatever, serve time. They will then stay on your record, expunge and remove the cannabis record, but then actually use that as part of your CV and go, this guy ran an enterprise that was worth X, Y, Z and a network this large. If we looked at it that way, we could then start to re-enfranchise the whole communities. So the part of Durham that I live at is heavily over-policed. I've had conversations in that local police station as part of the community coaching course that I told you about, where they showed me these maps and they went, look, we get information from here, here and here. These 3 estates, no one ever talks about anything ever. And that's because there's no jobs there. They are so economically deprived and so stigmatized as a small community that drugs are the only thing they can trade. Yeah. So they trade their own sort of baccy. They have various tobacco houses. Yeah. They trade most of the drugs between themselves. Yeah. And then they have like steal to order. So then the dealers will send out people that will then trade drugs for, I need shampoo, I need whatever. It's literally that kind of an economy that exists. Yeah. But without it, children starve. Yeah. Without it, people don't have clothes. There's not electric on the meters. You know what I mean? The very minimum that they have to pay in rent isn't met. Yeah. So then they're put into arrears and then chucked on the streets. There is a system that just is squeezing and destroying the most vulnerable in our society. Yeah. And as I've said, I suppose would be the main bullet point of this whole podcast is that the war on drugs is not just about the drug consumer. Yeah. It's about the wider effects on society. So people that have never touched drugs that live in extreme poverty, that's a consequence of prohibition. Yeah. Because if we were allowing the 10+ billion market of drugs in this country that already exists to be regulated, they would be able to use that money.
Definitely.
It would actually exist in our economy rather than being siphoned off to criminal elements that do the same thing that the corporate criminals do, which is hide their money offshore. That then for every 10 grand we lose, that's then 100 families that suddenly can't afford 2 weeks worth of dinner. Yeah. And I think that's the economics that we need to look at with this is a huge potential to stimulate economies while then revitalizing culture. Because if you then address that, okay, they're going to use cocaine, how do we create an environment that's safe for that? Okay, then maybe look at a cocaine lounge where you can't consume with alcohol, you can't consume with other drugs, or you can only then have a certain limit. Yeah. You control a percentage in it in terms of, instead of making it so pure, you could then break it down into the things, the way you produce it, instead of using things like kerosene, rocket fuel, shit like, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. It could then be produced in a very clean, synthesized process.
Less harmful.
Yeah. And if you then look at, I mean, Bolivia recently got in trouble with the United Nations because they did a calculation on how much cocaine it produced. So they went, basically the market of cocaine in Bolivia was worth, I think it was $1.5 billion. And they went, how much are we spending to eradicate cocaine every year? And they went, it's 1.9 billion. So they put forth a proposal to buy cocaine. So they said, what if we nationalize it and we just buy it from everybody? All these farmers, all these thousands of people that are growing it en masse, impoverished, hiding it under canopies against armed men on helicopters to then make tuppence on it for where it reaches the wider market.
What they call again? We've got a name for them, haven't they, though? Them people in there who got these like kind of
cartels.
Nah, there's a name for the people. It's not militia. It's like, is it militia? No, it's like.
Well, it's a lot of them are militia control.
But what's they've got a name though. They call them guys. They've got a name for it. I'm gonna have to. It's gonna kill us. Nothing.
I'm sure it'll come back to you. I look forward to a message at 4 a.m. from you. It's this dude. It's this dude.
I'm trying to think what it is. Right? But no, you're totally right. So obviously, it kind of contradicts itself as well, though, doesn't it? Like if we do. There's going to have to be a set plan in way, hasn't it? If we do kind of
try and fully legalize it to stop, as you said earlier, with these big companies coming in and just basically taking the free run of it and just stopping everyone else kind of having that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you get around that? How do you get around stopping
so we prioritize craft over corporate.
Yeah.
So this is something that we're seeing around the world in regions that have sort of echoed legalized or decriminalized sort of cannabis. Is the huge companies are still running at a loss. The five biggest cannabis companies in the world, or in North America at least, are all running on a loss, because they're trading on the stock market, they're trading on futures, the potential of the market. They're working not just on the assumption of certain future legislation changes, they're actively seeking to manipulate so that the outcome is favorable to themselves.
Yeah.
So the thing that we need to do is empower the communities from the ground up.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to do that for me is, like, say, is you end the punitive action against people. That if then the police find somebody growing cannabis in their garden, they do fuck all about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's then maybe an argument to be made at some point, if that person sells it, how you tax that.
Yeah.
But the point that I make to any MP, any politician, any police or authoritative person that I speak to is that, look, the average grower in the UK pays more tax than Amazon, Google combined. Mm-hmm. So they pay tax on their seeds, tax on the feed, tax on the equipment, tax on their energy, tax on their water. Do you know what I mean? They're a good, conscientious, supportive member of society. They're paying tax. They're contributing massively. Yeah. Whereas then these huge corporations that are held up as the monoliths on these pedestals is like, these are the people that we need to emulate, these giants of industry. And you're like, where does the money go? Mm-hmm. Look at what happened during fucking COVID. Like, I can't remember how many trillions it was of wealth was made by the richest handful.
So much ridiculous amounts.
There's a calculation that they did. I can't remember which international organization did it, and they basically it's exactly the same. The amount of money the rich made and the amount of money the poor lost. Mm-hmm. It's the same amount. So all of that, it wasn't generated anywhere. It was taken from the poorest people and given to a handful of fucking idiots that are so, for all I appreciate sort of Elon Musk's vision in some senses, the idea that he's got effectively all of the most money that anyone's ever fucking had. And he's gone, we'll go to Mars. We'll make cars fly and shit. I appreciate the advancement, but half the world hasn't got water. Half the world hasn't got access to food. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And we're going, the way we solve that is we just go start again. We go and create a gentrified, very whitewashed sort of version of history and create a new population. Bullshit to that, man. The people that are here deserve this. It's a consequence of an elite few that have dragged us into this over the past century. And the war on drugs has been their greatest social control social control tool, and has also been one of the best things for them to generate revenue. So it's calculated by the UN's one of the UN drug groups. There's several of them. Can't remember off the top of my head, but they calculated that it costs them about 100 billion a year to fight the war on drugs, whereas the illegal drug market makes 350 billion a year. Do you know what I mean? With that kind of profit return, you can kind of see why it's. But then we also know, if you look at, if your listeners want to check out the Iran-Contra scandal, is very interesting. So there's a book, Kill the Messenger, and a film, Kill the Messenger, that was made about this guy, Gary Webb. And he basically discovered that the CIA were selling cocaine, were importing cocaine.
I know the story,
selling it, and then they were using the money from this as a slush fund to fund the Nicaraguan rebels down in South America to avoid socialism taking foot, so that they could exploit their natural resources. That's just one of a multitude of stories where various agencies and entities around the world have tapped into the drug trade to generate this excess funds that they can keep off books, to have these sort of black ops, as it were, these illicit operations that destabilize various governments or create global events that work to their advantage. I mean, it's not conspiratorial in this. A lot of this is greatly evidenced. And the highest thing that I would say, also the main thing that would gives the greatest credence to this, is Gary Webb's death was ruled as an official suicide. Yet his body was found with 2 self-inflicted gunshot wounds to the head. That just doesn't make fucking sense. Do you know what I mean? For all in documentaries and whatever else, ballistics experts try to break it down, or sometimes with the mechanism in the hat, and no, it just doesn't add up, man. So I think that the incentive for drugs to be illegal because of the access to that market and the restriction. I mean, there was the Richard Nixon advisor at the White House, who, when he started the modern war on drugs in America in the early 70s, was a guy called John Ehrlichman. And he came out in the 90s with an interview with CNN. and said that, yes, we knew the war on drugs was a failure, but by associating the blacks with cocaine and the anti-war left and hippie movement with cannabis, we could demonize them night after night. We could criminalize them. We could raid their meetings and break up their communities. And that's what's happened ever since. So look at, then you get 40,000 people together in Hyde Park and they all blaze up for 420, which they're not going to be able to do tomorrow. People still will, but it won't be the same sort of thing. That's very controlled. The police turn up and they get you out of there by 5 o'clock, and it's all very, you're corralled in to experience this. And then you get out. And it's very much, it's a compromise, and it's this very sanitized, controlled thing. It's not
authentic.
And it's not a true expression.
So,
and I think that until we can have a space that allows those people to be themselves, truly be themselves. If they're then antisocial, deal with them in that way. If they're criminal, deal with them that way. But just going, you smell like weed, I'm going to refuse business to you. Or you're smoking a joint in somewhere I don't like, that you'd be allowed to smoke a cigarette, for example, then no, that discrimination needs to be recognized, because I'd say that's far more harmful than any one substance could be to an individual. Yeah, you may have a lifetime of dependency and whatever else, but if the state and system was there to recognize that at day one, instead of going, you druggie, you evil person, I'm not working with this person until they get sober, and doctors rejecting you, clinics rejecting you. If there was then somebody immediately went, all right, we recognize that you use this. What do you get from it? How does it help? All right. If we prescribe it to you, it's clinical. You have to use it here, though. And what we'll look to do is, are you homeless now? Right, we'll stabilize you with a house. What's your employment history? Do you have any other medical needs? Once you start addressing that shit, it goes. There is no reason for that person to be on the street committing crime, sleeping rough, appearing as a nuisance, if nothing else, because we have this horrible disdain and stigma around homeless people. So I talk often of this idea of, when I say the words heroin user to somebody, they immediately in their head think of a homeless person. Yet the vast majority of people that use heroin are using diamorphine from hospitals, and they're everybody. They're everybody. It's a drug that was prescribed for them. They're the majority representation of a heroin user. And even then, when you look at so-called recreational or adult consumers that are injecting or smoking heroin, a lot of them, and I mean a lot of them, you're talking 70 to 80% are so-called straight people that commit no criminality. The only crime they have is interacting with buying those drugs. Whereas if there was an outlet or a service they can sign up to,
everything.
There's a brilliant example recently in Dr. Carl Hart. So he's an amazing dude from Miami. Has
he got long hair?
Yeah, black guy with long dreaded hair. And he came out recently, and he's basically been a fellow at one of the universities in New York and various other places. And he came out and went, I like to use heroin. I smoke heroin. It's my thing. I don't really like to drink. I mean, I'll enjoy some heroin. I'll go do work. I'll go home. I'll set up some lines and I'll enjoy it and I'll have a nice experience. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with that. And he's really working hard to normalize that. And when you can put your own prejudice down for a second and stop kind of going, you take it and you look at the drug. The drug is neutral. The situation you're going about is an economic one. Society has done that to them. You then may go, but they robbed me or the whatever. It's like when you back an animal into a cage and you abuse it and you beat it, it's going to bite you. It's going to be horrible to you. It's going to hate you. But if you can then find a way to be brave enough and bold enough to show it compassion and show it love, it'll lessen and it'll understand. It'll always still have the chance and the propensity to lash out again. But that's not its fault. It's been traumatized by the system. And as soon as we can see that, not through a lens of victimhood and going, oh, you put too much in that sense, you kind of go, right, what happened? Here's the thing. Here's how we can help. Applied therapies. We're now starting to see clinics in the UK using ketamine, using LSD, DMT, psilocybin, to allow people, to have, because again, this is what majority of people are finding in these experiences. They're either finding a revelation like Bill Gates did or Steve Jobs did, or Francis Crick did when he discovered the double helix of DNA, or these countless other people that have taken these substances in the safety of these quite upper class universities and colleges around the world, where if they were to get caught with it, they'd be protected. Whereas those same substances taken with the same intent in the environment of an impoverished area, you go into prison, that's a class A, Schedule 1, it's a dangerous drug. They're just being, they're boys being boys or whatever. They're exploring their consciousness, you know what I mean? And it's almost protected as a heritage and a rite of passage since Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and Richard Alpert. Sorry, I'm trying to think if Ram Dass changed his name from Richard Alpert or if it wasn't, it was something else. No, is it? Yeah. It's not. Sorry, just fact checking myself in my head there. But so they basically pushed this idea in for quite a while. LSD wasn't legal. A lot of substances weren't legal. So there was experiments with MDMA used as the love drug in California, where couples that wanted to go get divorced had to first have an MDMA experience together. They reduced the divorce rate massively because all of a sudden they were honest and open. They could connect with each other and go and talk beyond the bullshit. Because instead of talking as those egos, as we were talking before, they were the two people behind them, and they kind of put the puppets they were playing down and went. And it's almost like I haven't seen you in years. Where have you been? You know, what are you now? Who are you? And that curiosity rose again, and that interest, and rekindled the reason for it. And we get lost with it. And again, this is why they're so powerful. Is that dealer I was talking to you about before? He had that lifetime of therapy in a night. The power of that in the hands of the people is terrifying to the people that run this shit. They go, no, you want to get right? You come through us. It's the whole thing of the church all over again. Going, you want to have a religious experience and go to God? You've got to come through us. You've got to come and pray in our pews. You've got to wear our iconography. You've got to use our words, dress as we dress, act as we act. No, this goes back to the 14th century when the Catholic Church was basically having a go at the priests in Ireland who were ingesting mushrooms. And they were having these revelatory experiences, and they banned them, saying that the only way to God is through the church. It should be through what do they call it? Is it flagellation?
I think so.
And mechanisms like that. That's how you achieve this sainthood. That's how you arise to this level. And you can glimpse it. Most of us do at the point of ecstasy within sex or wherever that you kind of get this experience of lightning through your body, of just this powerful connection to something beyond yourself. And I'm not talking in a spiritual or religious sense, but you're aware that we are intimately connected, all the people, all the things, all the objects. When you walk on the ground, you're touching it, pressing it, acting on it. When you breathe, you are adjusting the airways. When you consume food, you are taking something from a cycle. Everything you do affects something else. And those moments allow you to kind of, wow. And I think having that overview in the same way when mankind first left the Earth and we saw the Earth for the first time, the astronauts that saw that since have said that it shows the fragility. Because you suddenly see that in that circle is everything that has ever been and ever can be, as far as we're aware, everything. And that kind of overwhelming experience, as we were talking about before, of almost like loneliness. But if you can choose to look at it instead of run from it, it reignites that curiosity. And I think that's the most powerful thing that these substances have to offer. Yes, there should be the space to really get fucked up at a festival or wherever else, because I enjoy that too. And there should be the space for the spiritual and the medical and the therapeutic, but everything should come at once. You can't say the only way to access this experience is if you come to a clinic and you sign up to the NHS or whatever else, or you have to then fly to Peru, or you have to. Everything should be available everywhere, because in a lot of ways it already is. But without the right education and intention, we can end up using these substances dangerously. So people like Charles Manson, for example, he weaponized LSD against a lot of very, very vulnerable people. So he kind of used sex and drugs and lured them into these very dangerous mindsets, and then used basically kind of CIA tactics and various like mind alteration and manipulation techniques to break them into basically doing his bidding. So he sent out a bunch of people to go and just murder people and fuck shit up.
She was an actress, wasn't she? Pregnant, wasn't she?
I can't think there's an interesting documentary I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's quite a bit of stuff that's come out of that.
I've seen a mint one. I bet it's the same one. It's crazy, man.
And it just shows that, again, that's what they'll point to and go, that's why you can't have LSD. And you go, no, that was one crazy motherfucker.
You give him anything that he can do that with.
It's what we were talking about with the hammer before. It's like, you've given a hammer to 1,000 people, all of them hit the nail. The 1,001 guy hits himself in the face, and you want to ban us from having a hammer? I often bring it to the analogy of nuts. So a bunch of people are allergic to peanuts in the world. We haven't had a war on peanuts and eradicated them. People die from that shit. It causes anaphylactic shock and they can die. So what do? We label all food products contains nuts, may contain nuts, etc. We've gone to that end process to allow the freedom of other people to eat nuts, even though there's a small chance it could be dangerous to some. Whereas what we've done with drugs is gone, they can be potentially dangerous to a small sum of people, therefore we'll ban them for everyone. It's an absurd way of dealing with it. There's nothing else in society do we look at this. It's not economically viable. It's not environmentally sustainable. It's not ethical. It's against our human rights. Technically, if you look at the legislations and the conventions, it's illegal under its own wording. You look at the damage that it's caused, like I say, within industry. The absence of cannabis has meant that we've been reliant on diesel and petrol. Whereas when Henry Ford designed the first Model T, that was cannabis, flax, and hemp seed was the body. The engine on it was going to run off Rudolf Diesel's design, a German engineer who'd created a biodiesel engine that was going to run off sunflower seed oil and cannabis seed oil, bioethanol that's 5 times cleaner than modern petroleum. He fell off a boat on the way to the diesel unification conference between Germany and the UK, was never seen from again. His technology was then inherited by somebody who eventually snubbed it all. Ford then lost his ability to push hemp, because that then went for the Hemp for Victory campaign around the Second World War. And we kind of lost that mechanism and that idea of what we do with that industry. And then now we're at a point with graphene. So graphene was discovered in Manchester at a university, and it's a single atom thin in a hexagonal sort of honeycomb pattern. It's 100 times stronger than steel, 200 times stronger, more conductive than copper. If you run salt water over graphene, it generates electricity. If you compound them together, it creates supercapacitor batteries that are more efficient than lithium cell, which is going in all of these new cars and shit. And they then discovered you can make that from the sticks of cannabis, from the stalk in the herd of it. You can strip down and you can produce this, right? So they were doing it for millions of dollars a ton. Some Canadian scientists came along and went, you can do it for a couple $100 if you do this, and this is the process. And so more companies have discovered it. So rather than farming mineral lithium around the world with child labor and shit, we could be creating these batteries. There's then an idea that I've pitched about you creating a desalinization plant that runs on carbon nanotubes. So as the salt water runs through it to create clean water, it generates electricity. So there's ways that we can apply technology using cannabis and using other plants, using mycelium networks, bamboo as well, being a hugely beneficial building material, still used in some parts of China for the poles, the construction poles on skyscrapers and shit. Because of its tactile strength. It's an incredible plant. So if we then incorporate nature as a technology and start to look at it that way, huge. So deforestation we could end. Deforestation leads to desertification, which is where the land then just dies because the trees hold like 50% of the water basin of an area. It's ridiculous. So all these things are interconnected. And again, it comes back to, if we end the war on drugs, we promote cannabis. You can plot on the UN's graph of global temperatures, the date they first put the marijuana tax on in America in 1937, and then when they started global eradication of cannabis in 1971. You can see it. It gets worse because then they went and started destroying millions of acres of cannabis, natural, wild cannabis, these land races that have been cultivating and dealing with themselves for generations. And they went to war with this thing. And the consequence of this is they wasted all of this carbon in the fuels of the stuff. They wasted all of these man hour. They wasted all of billions and billions of dollars. And for what? Cannabis is now more widely available than ever, but it's all being grown incorrectly, unenvironmentally. We're having to hide and grow it in lights in darkened rooms and in warehouses instead of being able to grow outdoors or grow in more sustainable systems. We can be so much smarter with this if they'd stop criminalizing us. So again, the benefit of that is we reduce carbon. We start to tackle climate change. You know, if we can then get off petroleum, for example, we don't have to be subservient to the Saudis or the Middle East. So we don't have to continue selling weapons of war to then see millions of Yemenis destroyed. There's, again, it comes out to so many unique mechanisms that the idea of us sat here and smoking it as a drug, that's the excuse they use to stop everything else. They're pointing to this little grain and they're missing the beach. And that's everything else. All of the other consequences of our reality in some form or another are linked back to the perpetuation of the war on drugs. And ending it starts with normalizing cannabis, in exploring fully the therapeutic benefits alongside allowing us to just enjoy a fucking smoke, to sit back, have a chat and explore different ideas, to connect in different ways, to put apart, like I said, those puppets before and strip apart who we think we are and the way we live and have that honest conversation with another human being. Because these 2 hours of decent, genuine connection, or however long it's been of us conversating, is far more meaningful than a lifetime of friendship with somebody that is just your drinking buddy that you never talk anything serious with. Do you know what I mean? You may have the comfort of not feeling alone physically, but you don't have someone to connect with. You don't have someone that's truly got your back. Whereas then being able to get in deep with somebody and risk being vulnerable and going, I think this, what do you think? Rather than being worried about what they'll think about who you are or what ideas you represent. I think that makes people far stronger than they recognize. It's a bit bravery through vulnerability.
I couldn't agree with you more, mate.
that's a great point. I'll end it on there then, mate. I really appreciate that, Simpa. That's a really interesting conversation we just had, mate. I really appreciate your time, mate. I'm looking forward to watching it back, mate. So thanks.
Likewise, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, mate.